Hi, folks. Larry Rolla here. Tonight I have my pal Freddy on, and another friend of mine that I know a long time. I know him since he's a kid, and I'm going to tell a story about him because I think I mentioned it at least 100 times on this podcast. I think I have 120 podcasts going, and I think I mentioned his name at least half of them, and I'm going to tell you why. So here's Freddy, and here's my friend Joe Ricco. Hi, Joe.
Hey, Larry. Hey, Joe.
Hey, Larry, Freddy.
All right, now let me tell you why, Joe. I mention your name all the time, and I have no idea. I know I'm positive it wasn't that Roosevelt Raceway reunion thing. It was long before that, and I don't know when it was, where it was, how it was. I have no idea. All I know is that I was penniless. I was on the park bench. I was penniless. I don't know how I got to where I was, and you were part of that the guys there. And as the meeting or whatever it was broke up, and this is all I remember, was that Joe Ricco walked over to me, never said a word, and put $100 bill in my shirt pocket and just walked away. And I said, what the? And I looked at it. It was either $100 bill or two $100 bills. I don't remember. And that to me at that time was like $100 million. And there's probably 10 things in the whole world that I remember because I forget everything. And that's one of them. And I mention it all the time. And I couldn't believe it because prior to that, I hadn't seen you since, God, probably since 1978, 79. And that happened. I don't know if you remember it or not, but it's something that I will never forget. And I say it all the time. Whenever I'm around horsemen, I always say, you see Joe Ricco? I just get, and that's one thing I know. You must have heard me say it a couple of times.
I did hear it. I'll tell you how I remember it. And if I may, I'll tell you the backstory to it also.
Say anything you want, Joe.
Okay, it was like mid '80s, like maybe '85 or '6, something like that. And I was at Roosevelt, and I had a small stable, but I was doing good. And I was driving some horses. You know, look, I was never an A driver. I was probably, third string, but I was doing good. I was making money. And Larry, I guess at that time, I didn't even know it, but I ran into him outside my barn, and I was talking to him, and he was trying to sell me. He said, "You want to buy this watch?" And it was selling a watch. And I said, "How much?" And he says, $100. And I think I took 200 or 300 out, put it in your pocket, and I said, "Keep the watch. Don't worry about it." And that was that. But what Larry doesn't know, because you just don't remember it, and it was probably maybe mid '70s. And I mean, Larry is an open book, so you can read it. He's an open book. But Larry, the amazing thing about him, like he would have one day, brand new Cadillac, nice looking girl, money all over the place, and big barn. And then it could be like overnight, he's, pedaling a bicycle and he's got nothing. So this was like sometimes in maybe like 74, 5. And he wasn't in A barn. I think he was up higher than A barn.
Yeah, the first barn I was in was G, I think.
That's what you were in. You were in G barn because I was there when I worked for Frank Brown when I was 14. You were in G barn.
That's at Monticello Raceway.
Yeah.
Yeah, Monocel. Yeah.
Yeah, Freddy, keep us straight. So what happened is Larry, it was one of them times where he was down on his luck, and he had no horses, and he was selling a bunch of stuff. And my friend Skeeter and I said, let's go up see Larry what he's selling, maybe we can, get something. So we go up there, and my friend Skeeter wanted a pair of knee boots, tender boots. He got a few things. And Larry, most of the stuff was sold already. He was in the trunk, like organizing stuff, and said, Larry, what do we owe you for this? And he lifted.
Did we lose the audio?
Yeah, we lost Joe.
Joe, we lost the audio. Larry, check the mute button on Joe.
How do I check the mute button on Joe?
Scroll over to him and see if the microphone shows up. It looks like he's been muted.
I have it. Unmute.
I just hit it, Joe.
No, it has to be on his end. It has to be on Joe's end. I'm going to bring Michael on. Hello, Michael.
Michael.
Sorry, fellas. How are you?
Okay, Michael. We're having a problem with Joe Ricco's on, and his microphone just went off. So we have to try to fix that. I don't know how to fix it. It got to be on Joe's end.
Joe, scroll over the screen and see if you see a little microphone there, and see if you can click onto it to say unmute. Well, you're on your iPad, correct, or something, Joe? Yeah.
You got his phone number? Call him up. I don't have his phone number.
The technical difficulties. Hey, Joe. Check your. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, Larry, what it's saying is that the host muted him. So you have to unmute him. So you have to go to his screen. And basically you're going to see, if you scroll over to his screen, you should see these little mic things or mute thing come up there, and you just unmute him.
I see it. It says unmute mic.
Yep,
and
that's what you do.
I did it, but I still don't hear him.
He said he did it.
You know what? Maybe Joe has to be disconnected and then go to the link again and start that whole process.
Okay. You got that, Joe? He wants you to sign out and then come back in again. Okay, so that's what Joe's going to do. Michael, welcome back.
I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to be anywhere.
We're having some technical difficulties. we had poor Mr. Joe Ricco talking for about 5 minutes, and nobody could hear a word that he was saying. And it sounded like it was a good story to start with, didn't it, Larry?
It's every week. It's something else. Michael, you're in the dark. That's the other problem we had the other day. Everybody was in the dark.
Well, I got the halo over me. Look.
Okay, let's see. Joe, can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, Larry, don't touch anything.
All right. I don't touch anything. First, I just want to see something. Okay. I'm not touching anything. All right. Michael, we'll get to you in a little while, but we got a lot of stuff me and Joe got to talk about. So
no worries, sir.
In the middle, just sit there and try to lighten up because you look like a shadow.
All right. Will do.
Wait a minute. Hold it. What happened to Joe? Joe, can you hear me? What happened now?
We got 2 Joe Riccos now.
What the hell happened?
Joe, can you hear anything?
We can't hear him. Joe Chop. Oh my God.
Okay, can you get rid of one of them?
I'm trying.
Hey.
Let's see.
Well, we got 2 Joe Riccos up here now.
Oh boy.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Okay. All right, Joe, can you hear me?
I hear you on my phone, but I'm not. Maybe it's because I got
Joe got to hang his phone up, I think. Okay, he can hear us, but we can't hear him.
Joe, do you know sign language?
Oh, gee.
He does.
Well, you know what he has to do? Tell Joe to do the same thing he did before. Go off and come on. Yeah, try it again.
Sure you don't want to do sign language.
Oh, boy. I think you should call him up and tell him to do the same thing.
I thought we did. I think that's what he's doing.
No, before when he did it, he went blank. I think I'm going to have to. Well, I don't think this is my fault. Yeah, you got to tell.
You there, Joe?
Tell him to disconnect and do it again.
He's got to try disconnecting and do it all over again. Okay. All right, he's doing that all over again.
My friends are calling me. They said him they look like him in the witness protection program. Is that true?
Yeah, now you're light. Now we can see you. Before we couldn't see you.
All right. Well, maybe before they couldn't see, maybe that's better.
Here's Anthony. Now I'm getting all these calls. Hello. I have to end the call.
Okay, Joe, you there?
I'm here.
Okay, we got Joe.
I think we got it now, Anthony. Bye. All right. Are we all set now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, if you remember, finish the story.
All right. So I don't know where we left off, but it was.
We left off with you talking and nothing coming out, Joe.
Were we in Barn G yet?
Yeah, we're in Barn G, and
Okay.
I was
at
going
Monticello Raceway.
Yeah, we're at Barn G in Monticello, and it's like in the mid 70s, and Larry is busted, and he's selling everything. No horses left. He's just selling everything. So my friend Skeeter, he needed some stuff. We went up to Larry's barn, and he ended up picking a bunch of stuff, knee boots, tender boots, a couple things like that. Larry, there wasn't much there left. Larry had his head in the trunk. He was organizing stuff and said, Larry, what do we owe you for the knee boots, tender boots? And he lifted his head up, and he had this big shit-eating grin on him. He looked and he smiled, and he said, you guys are broker than I am. He says, just take it. Take whatever you want, whatever's left. We didn't do that. We just took what we got, and we ended up going away. And I always remembered that.
There was some of them times when one guy called me and he says, I just come back from New Zealand and I saw one of your trunks there, because whenever I go broke, I'd sell my trunks, the bikes, the jock, I'd sell whatever I had to sell. Because during that time, I'm sure you know it, Joey, I guess everybody knew it. When I first got up to Monticello, I had terrible addiction, and I was in a lot of trouble. And there were weeks when I made a lot of money, and weeks when it was that kind of life. But I want to say this, because what you said before was not true, that you were like a second, third grade driver. That wasn't true. I left Monticello in 1978 because finally I got even with all the demons. And Joe DeFrank finally gave me stalls at the Meadowlands, and I left in 1978. And the year that I left, Joe, you were the leading driver. Right. You had 3 horses that held a track record there. One was a 2-year-old Payson filly, and the other 2 is a mare and in a gelding, and you were on your way. And I think your only competition up there, I believe, and maybe I'm wrong because it's hard for me to remember that far back. I think Catello already left for the Meadowlands.
He did, thank God.
And you were like the main guy up there. The problem when you left Monticello, I think, and I'm only guessing because it was 3-4 years after that, I got barred again for life in 83, 84. And then naturally I was out of it. But you, I think, had the same problem as guys like that left the Meadowlands and left New York, because between in New York, Carmine and Lucian and all them top guys, and at the Meadowlands there was Campbell and O'Donnell, and you were catch driving at the time, and you would get 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th choice, and it was like a waste of time. Even Jimmy, the kid Morel, he left and went back up to Buffalo and he was another good driver, and you just couldn't. You could never get on a horse that had a chance, and I think that's what happened to you. But every move that you made, from what I looking back, you got in at the right time, you got out at the right time, you got into real estate at the right time, and you became very successful. I remember a few years back, every time I look on Facebook, you're in another vacation spot on a beach someplace. You're
yeah. I bought a place down in Myrtle Beach, so I go back and forth a lot.
Yeah. So what you said about yourself was not true, but I believe you got out at the right time, and I don't know. I'm gonna ask you the question why you did get out, and if it wasn't one of them reasons, fine. But I want you to tell me a little bit about, because I remember this because similar stuff happened to me in Yonkers in 1989. You were suspended for 15 days for driving that trotter. They said you didn't try to win, you didn't hit him. You didn't hit him the last 16th of a mile. And tell me. Well, I think I know the whole story, but tell it so the people listening can hear that story, because in my opinion, that was another case of political appointees in positions of total incompetence, meaning the judges. And I think you wind up beating that case. But you want to talk about that just a bit?
Sure. It was about that time. I had a horse that had the 8-hole, and I was racing him at Yonkers. Roosevelt might have been closed by then. Yeah, it might have been 89. No, Roosevelt was open then. It was 80. Roosevelt closed in 88. I think it was like 86 or something like that. Yeah, you were right with the year. But anyway, I had the 8-hole, and the horse was lazy. And I know in today's business, it's totally different than it was back then. But I hit this horse with the whip, not the horse, the shaft and the wheel and stuff to make noise and stuff. And I did that probably, I think it was like 30 times during the mile. And because I was at one point like 8th, 7th, and I got up to finish 2nd or 3rd. And I never got along with Vincent Pagamo. I don't like him. I didn't
That's
like
because
him.
he was a creep.
Yeah,
he was people, just not a nice guy.
I always look back at my mother. She'd say, Joey, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. So if somebody mentions Pagamo's name, I don't say anything. But I don't like the guy, So anyway, Pagamo calls me in. He gives me 30 days, and he gives me 30 days for lack of effort. Right? He thought I stopped whipping down. I said I was beating the horse the whole mile, the shaft and the number pad and all that. I says, you saw me jumping around. I said, down by the wire, I'm exhausted. I finished like 2nd or 3rd. So He gives me a 30-day suspension. I fight it. I end up, Joe Feraldo is representing me. We ended up winning the case. It made, I think, the Law Journal, and the ASPCA picked it up and called Feraldo and said if the state appeals it, they will come in on our behalf because, you know, they didn't want me to beat the horse to death. You know what I mean? So we beat the case. Well, again, the horse business is not like any other business. So we beat the case. Shortly, like a week later, my chest was out. I was happy I beat him because I didn't like the guy. The track calls me in and they said, you can't race anymore. So why can't I race? Well, it's ours. They said, you know what? After 30 days, why don't you reapply? Well, then 30 days, the light bulb went off. I beat him, so now they beat me. You know, so you don't win. So I didn't race for 30 days. And after like 60 days, Yonkers let me back in. You know, so I got punished for fighting Vincent Pagamo and the Racing and Wagering Board. You know, I watch your show, and people like to pass judgment against people. Nobody knows what you're going to do in certain situations. And the other thing is, I remember when it first came down, Eddie Gomaris and Ronnie Gomaris, two great people, husband and wife, just the salt of the earth. They're just, and they're hardworking. Well, not anymore, but they were hardworking people, and you know, really. He was in my barn, or I was in his barn, and his owner at the time owned like maybe 4 horses, was a doctor. He got caught giving out pills, diet pills, you know, amphetamines to people to lose weight. No prescription and all that. Well, that night, he had 2 horses in that he owned, that doctor. They scratched him. But the next day, he could go to his office and practice medicine because he was innocent until proven guilty. But his horses could not race because the Racing and Wagering Board said, you're guilty, you're done. You know, once they get, you know, I mean, it's an open format. Once they get a hard on for you, you're done. They're going to get you one way or the other.
Very good point.
They don't play by the rules, you know.
Joe, I lost millions of dollars trying to fight them. 3 different times I got barred for life. I wound up getting reinstated years later, but it cost a tremendous amount of money because I fought in New York State, I fought in Jersey, and I fought in Florida. And you know you have, and it's very expensive. And you're right. In harness racing, you're guilty until you prove yourself innocent. And who do you have to prove yourself innocent to? The people who is a judge and jury are the same people who accused you and you know, convicted you. So they convict you, and then you got to go in front of them for an appeal. It's really a joke.
I raced one time. Well, I was trying to get racing. The USTA wouldn't give me a license. They said, we'll give you a license if New York State gives you a license. So, okay. So New York State says, I'll give you a license if the USTA gives you a license. So now we're going back and forth like this. So I got lucky. I took him to court, and the judge said, it was an Article 78 to order the show cause. They had no cause. They had no cause. So the judge said, well, you can't stop this guy from making a livelihood and driving until you can show me something. You don't have anything. So they still wouldn't give me a license, but they had to make me race. So I raced for 2 years without a license at Roosevelt and Yonkers. And what happened is I went in to see Jimmy Michaels, and good judge. Jimmy Michaels said, I don't know what to do. He says, here's a piece of paper. So he wrote on a piece of paper, please let this guy go wherever and give him any rights that a person with a license would have. And he gave me the paper. So I carried the paper.
You're talking about USTA license, not a
No, New York State.
Okay.
The judge told New York State, in order to show cause, they had no cause. So they said, well, we're not giving him a license. You don't have to give him a license, but you can't stop him from racing. So it was at a stalemate. So they wouldn't give me a license, but they couldn't stop me from racing. So I could race with this piece of paper. So, and I remember, guy calls me and he asked me to go to Buffalo for a stake race. I said, okay. So I leave LaGuardia and I fly up to Buffalo. I get there. I hand the guy, and this guy doesn't know me. Everybody knew me at Roosevelt, Yonkers. I could just walk in the paddock, sign my name and walk in. I hand him the piece of paper. The guy looks at me, like, what is this? Where's your license? I said, that's it. So, it ended up, I raced, but.
Why'd you leave the business, Joe?
I'm sorry?
Why'd you leave the business?
I was broke. Honestly, I didn't want to leave. I had no money. I was floating. It's almost like a Larry Rolla story. I was floating credit cards, one credit card to the other, and then get another. And I was doing that because I couldn't make any money. I was on my couch at Roosevelt closed. I live in Westbury, right near Roosevelt. Pouring rain, winter time. I got one mount in at Yonkers, got the 8-hole. I got to get up. I got to go drive the horse because I'm afraid to lose the drive next week. I had, at that time, I had a, second wife. My daughter was like 3-4 years old. And my son, Jason, I had custody of him. He was like 12, 13. My daughter, Kelly, was with us. So I had a family. I had to stay here. I didn't know what to do because I have no education. I have nothing to fall back. And I never thought I could do anything but horses. So I'm busted. I'm at the end because I had money in the last 25,000, last maybe 50 I had. I took 25 of it and I bought a colt. And he turned out to be nothing. So, and then that's where I end up being 75 in the hole. So now I'm at Yonkers, and there's a guy. I've had a lot of angels in my life, a lot of them, and they come in all different forms. It's absolutely. I am the luckiest friggin' guy you've ever met in life. I really feel that. The only thing is, like I've told my kids, everybody gets lucky. Just don't fuck it up when you get it. That's the difference. I didn't fuck it up. So anyway, this guy, Al Penzi, I don't know if you know him. He was the horseman's rep at Roosevelt and Yonkers. Brilliant guy. Very, very, very brilliant. And I think he worked for CBS Records at one time. He retired. He owned some horses with Anthony Abatello. And he was doing this more like a hobby. Guy was a pretty smart guy. So he saw I was busted, he knew me, and he grabbed me one day, and I have no idea why. He said, "What are you going to do?" I said, I don't know, He says, "Well, why don't you go into real estate?" I said, "Real estate? What do I know about real estate?" He said, "Well, you take a class." I said, "I didn't go to class when I was in school." He says, well, let me ask you a question. If I told you to bet a horse tonight, what would you do? I said, I'd bet $100 on him. He says, okay, so take the $100 and bet it on yourself and go take the course. So I started thinking about it and I said, okay, I'll do this. And I swear everything I'm telling you is true. So I go to on Old Country Road, right where the Gamboa used to be, was a Holiday Inn. I go to the Holiday Inn to the class, and I said, and I'm sweating. I'm a nervous wreck because I didn't do any good in school. So I said, well, I'm going in, but if I get overwhelmed, I'm out of there. The horse made a break. I take, I blew the 100 and I left. So I go in there, and it was kind of interesting. And I'm listening. So I went back the next day. The next day, I think it was like maybe a 10-day class or something. So I ended up doing it. Now I got to take the test. Well, I don't take tests. So oh shit. So they gave you a practice test, and I kept practicing. And then I had to take the state test. Ended up doing that. I got my license. So my mother-in-law worked on Post Avenue in a stationery store for like 30 years. So she knew this guy that was a realtor that owned a company, Century 21 company, and he would come in every day and pick the paper up. So she hooked me up with him. His name was Morty Bernstein. So I went to work for him, and I learned the ropes. And it wouldn't mean anything for you, but I was hungry. So I started doing things like I would knock on doors, soliciting work. I did anything to make money, and I would take customers out at nighttime. It didn't matter. So, and what I would do is I'd get in about 12 o'clock. I had no suits or anything. So my wife went out and bought me like a sports jacket and a tie. I didn't even know how to tie it, the tie. And I would go to the barn at Yonkers. I had 2 horses. I would jog them, take care of them, run back, go to shower, put on the jacket, and I'd go into the office. And that's what I kept doing. And I started making money. And then I realized I'm making a little bit more money and a little bit more money. And I said, wow, this is not bad. Then I started really enjoying it. And then finally I said, you know what? I got to get out of the horses. So I got out of the horses. I was out for probably 15 years. I didn't own, I didn't do anything. And I was making good money. I was actually like living a normal life. We would go on vacation. Everybody was okay. So a good friend of mine, which Larry knows, is Skeeter Pines. He had his problems, but he was an alcoholic, but he was a good friend of mine, and he would take a bullet for me. So he passed away, and I ended up, it was like end of October, and I called David Jingles and I said, let's go to Harrisburg. So I bought a yearling and I named him Skeeter Pines, off of my friend. He turned out to be nothing. But you know what happens? I was clean for 18 years, and then all of a sudden I took one dose and boom, I'm back in business. So then I started, I claimed the horse in the Meadowlands. My son George told me to, he said, if you're looking for a horse, take this one. So I took the horse and I claimed him. Flying Standby was the name of the horse, a trotter, and gave it to David Jingles. He did phenomenal with them. Then I bought another trotter. He did super with. So we started, doing great. I saw you up in Goshen at that time when I had them horses, because I remember you came over. You said, "Nice car," but so then that's how I got back in, and then
I see you driving a couple of what were they, amateur races, or I saw
no. No,
don't insult them.
No.
You won a couple of races. I saw it on Facebook. Somebody put
recently.
Yeah. Well, you know what it is. My whole life until today, in my mind, I loved racing horses. I loved it. I loved the adrenaline. Larry. I'm just going out on an edge here. Larry's a little bit different. He likes racing and all that, with the cars, and then he went with the horses. But Larry is like a fine-tuned guy. He liked taking a horse and training him and rigging him up, and he was more of a horseman. I like driving more than anything. My youngest son, Jason, he ended up putting me on 3 horses in one day, and one of them won. Well,
so you kept your license up all that time.
Well, I did, and I'll tell you why. I said I worked so hard to keep it, I wasn't giving it up. So I just kept getting it. So he put me down on 3 horses, and I won one and finished third with the other, and the other one finished like 5th or something. So that got my adrenaline going a little bit. And then I bought a horse to race, and I raced him a little bit. Then 3 years ago, I bought a trotter from Mike Conti out in Iowa, and he did okay. And then Mike Conti and I went partners on a couple of yearlings that he bred. And he had this one filly, and he said to me, why don't you race her at, she was done with the Iowa stake races, 3-year-old. He said, why don't you race her at Monticello? I said, Mike, she's not good enough for Monticello. She's the fair, she just barely made money there. He said, no, I think she could be good there. I said, no. So he said, nah, try her. I said, okay, send her, try her. So we tried her, and I trained her, and I went over to 3/4 slow, and then I just sucked a tooth to her, and I came in last quarter in 28 and a piece. I said, holy shit, so really? So I raced her. The first time I raced her, she finished second in a non-winners of 1, because they were all the non-winner, just no betting races out there. So, and I did good with her. She won like 5 or 6 races for me. I sent her to New York. My son George drove her. He won one in 54, and then she ended up broke a bone. She should be dropping a foal. I sent her out to Iowa. I bred her in New York. I sent her out to Iowa to Mike. The foal would be Iowa bred because the foal would be dropped there, but it'd be New York bred because it's so surreal cold. Oh, it's cold to Philly, I don't know. And it probably should drop sometime this month.
Don't get caught in the trap, Joe. Don't get caught in the trap. Listen,
Well,
you mentioned your son George. For the people that don't know, tell them who your son George is. His son George is George Brennan, one of the leading guys in the world in harness racing. And I remember him when he was crawling in the dirt at Monticello. And that's where, when did he start driving? I remember he started with Johnny DeSimone and with all of them, Plutino. I think he started with them guys.
George started driving at 14. At 14, he drove at Goshen. And then at that time, which I think they should do it again, but who knows, there was a Harness Horse Youth League or something like that. And he drove at Yonkers, I think, at 15. They had not a betting race. He had a matinee license at 14. But at 15, he drove, it was all young kids that they let drive at Yonkers. It was a race that they put on, an exhibition race. I think they should do that. But he started driving very young. But he was he had so much talent. He still does. But when he was a kid, I used to train colts, and he was like maybe 12, and we would train in a set of 4, and he'd say, can I get a whip? I said, no whip. And you sit forth, you do not pull. Unless I tell you to pull, you do not pull. And he would listen to directions absolutely perfect. I mean, my other children, they all say that, he's like, but they call him Jesus, because, whenever we get together, him and I, we talk horses, because the role has changed. When he was a kid, he used to pick my brain. Now I pick his brain. I can't do what he does. I'll tell you, the best compliment I had, and it meant so much to me, is I won the last race with that filly up in Monticello before I sent it down to Yonkers. And he says, I don't think I've ever seen you drive better. He says, you're driving great. It was like, I can't believe, I felt so good that he said that to me. It made me feel good. And then he drove her at Yonkers. He won and got taken down because he come out late. And then he came back the next week and won with her. And then he finished second, third. And then she broke the bone. But he was a different kid. He was always quiet. You know, he never mouthed it off. He was perfect. He was perfect. That's why my other kids say that. But he used to be with me all day. I mean, we would travel. You know, I remember I had a stake race up in Buffalo. I was driving a horse for Frank Brown, and he said, not Buffalo, Batavia. And he said, "Can I come with you?" I said, "Yeah, hop in the truck." He'd hop in the truck. We'd drive, whatever, 5 hours up to Buffalo, Batavia, 5 hours back. The ride back that day was bad. Oh, I drove bad that day. I was kicking myself in the ass. He didn't say a word. I just kept beating the steering wheel because I was so mad at myself.
I got to ask you a question, Joe. When they convinced me to write the book, Michael, don't go away because we're going to get to you. We got a lot of things.
I'm listening intently. I'm loving this.
So when they convinced me to write my book, I did it out of anyway. I must have called up 100 people because I don't remember. I don't remember anything from what I did because from the time I got thrown out of Yonkers and went on the road from probably 64 until 78, I was in the wrong lane. I did whatever I had to do, and I was completely oblivious to everything that was around me, and I did what I did. But when I wrote the book, I couldn't remember everything, and I called up a lot of kids that worked for me, a lot of other people, and saying, "Do you remember any stories that pertain to me that I could put in this book?" And they must have sent me thousands of stories. I had thousands of pages that I had to go through. I never called you because you were one of the guys. You were one of the Catello Manzi and one or two other guys up in Monticello that were, like, in my mind, unapproachable. But
that's true. That's absolutely true.
I respected that with Catello because I raced with his father, I raced with his uncles, I raced with the whole family. And with you, I never approached you because of your father, who had a restaurant up there and was raised with a bunch of friends of mine from the Bronx. In fact, I remember one day I brought 5 or 6 or 7 of them up to his restaurant in Monticello, and he cooked a real nice meal for all of us. But do you remember, even though you weren't, do you remember any stories about me? Because now we're putting together a TV series, and I'm going to need more, even though I have lots. But any stories about me that you could let me know that have some meaning?
Well, like I said, you know, yes, I do. I'll give you one quick one. It's going to show you how crazy I am. But I bought a filly, 2-year-old, a yearling, cheap, and I raced her, and it was fall time. I'm at Yonkers, Roosevelt. I'm sorry, Roosevelt, and it was a $90,000 race. I owned 25% of her, and plus I got 5% for driving, 5% for training. So it was a $90,000 race. My partners didn't want me driving her because now we're at Roosevelt, you know, can't we put somebody else? But I own 25%, so I drove her. She ended up winning the race. She wins the race. I'm all pumped. You know, and I get to Monticello. About a couple of days later, guy comes to my barn and says, Larry Rolla wants to talk to you. I said, about what? He says, I don't know. So he said he's at his trailer. I said, all right, I'll be down and I'll go down a little bit. So I'm thinking he's approaching me to do something because he's got this reputation. I get down there, and you probably don't know how you are, Larry, compared to when a young guy is looking at you, because you just, like, even if nobody knows what's in your mind, because you always have that same look, and you're always like, nobody knows if you have $100 million or you have $1. You're just like the same person. So I sit down, and he's sitting across from me, and he says, "Hey, you got a nice filly there." I says, "Yeah." He says, "You want to sell it?" I said, "No." He says, "Tell you what, I'm going to give you $80,000 for her." I said, "Well, I got to speak to my partners." So I go back, I leave. I called my partners, but I wasn't pushing the sale because it was the first decent horse I had, like a stake horse. And what happens when you don't have that and you're not real savvy, you start fantasizing and you think it's better than she is. She could beat this one and beat that one. You start fantasizing. And she wasn't. She was just a good New York sire stake horse. That's it. And not a dominant one. So I go back, I tell Larry no. Larry says to me, he says, "Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you $100,000. This is 1980. I own 25%. I said, "All right, let me get back there." I go back, I do the same thing, I come back. I said, "Larry, no deal." So Larry looks me in the eye and he says, "Listen," he said, "I'm going to do something for you that's going to set you up." He says, "I'm going to give you that $100,000 and I'm going to give you $10,000 cash for you to solidify this deal. You're going to be my broker. You're going to be brokering this deal." And the way he sounded, it sounded like, this was great. So now you're getting 25% of you own of the 100,000 plus an extra 10 for you. I didn't make the deal. Next year, that was the end of that year. So we turned her out, trained her back. I staked her to everything there was, the Mistletoe Chalet, all these races, right? At the Meadowlands. Now I'm going against, the best in the country. I kept up with them in the post parade. I did do that. But as soon as the gate left, her tongue was hanging out, and I'm looking over at Billy O'Donnell and Campbell. My tongue's hanging out. So I think that year I spent like 20 something thousand in stake races. She made 18,000 for the year.
That's why you never should fall in love with
You gave me the opportunity of a lifetime, and I blew it. That was my meeting with Larry. Yeah. That was,
you still selling real estate?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I had a decent year last year. I have a good year this year. I'm at a situation in my life where I don't have to sell. So it's really good because I don't hustle anymore. I'm not out looking for business. Somebody calls me, "Hey, Joe," like I think last month I put like 4 or 5 deals in contract, just people that know me. Joe, can you the one thing that bothers me is because of my age, they say, "Joe, you still doing it?" I said, "Well, did you get my calendar this January?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, why would I send you a calendar if I wasn't doing it?" So.
Oh, you're only like 70 years old, right?
I'm 71.
71.
I just turned 70.
There was a girl, as talking about your father and the guys from the Bronx that I brought up there that grew up with your father. That's where you grew up. There was a girl there. Her name, I'll tell you her name because it's all good. Her name was Janie. She was absolutely gorgeous. Black hair, green eyes, beautiful. And every wise guy in the Bronx wanted to go out with her. And she was very sharp. She was very smart. She would go out with all of them, all of the top guys, the bosses, the underboss, everybody. And they would take care of her and buy her car, whatever she never needed for nothing. And then okay, so that was that. About 30, 40 years later, this was maybe 5-10 years ago. I got a phone call. She found me on Facebook, and she calls me up, and we have dinner. So I go to Yonkers and I meet her and have dinner. She's still beautiful and gorgeous and everything else. And she says, before we go to dinner, I want to take you someplace. So she takes me to a place, and there's a big storefront with her name on top, and it says her name, Realty. So having dinner, I says, how'd you get in that? You know what she said? She gave me such a great answer, and a true answer. She said that I didn't want to wind up like all the other girls that were going out with these guys working in the diner after they all went to jail. So when I saw the end was coming and these guys, Frankie, Dickie, and all them wind up going to jail, she took the real estate test and now she owns her own real estate thing with about 15. We went inside. She has like 15, 20 desks and everything, and she's doing very, very well. She opened up a delicatessen with her daughter and Italian delicatessen. She's doing very, very well. Good. And good for her. She was a good kid, but that reminded me of that. Well,
yeah, the best thing that ever happened to me was getting into real estate. And I own some.
How come you never started your own real estate business?
You know what? In the beginning, I was making more money than my bosses. Now they make a lot more than me, but they own like 14 Coldwell bankers. But I was making good money. I did go partners and with them, and I bought some houses. I own like five houses with them. I own one on the side myself. I collect the rents. I didn't want the headache. I almost bought an office, and the office I was in, La Rosa Realty, and I asked him for. I was listening to Al Penzi because Al Penzi got me in this business, and Al said to me, "Well, get me all the paperwork." And I'm telling you, this guy was very smart. So I got him all the documentation, the books and stuff, and he looked at it and he said, "Joe, the guy doesn't make money." So I said, "Well, how much is it worth?" He says, "You tell me, how much is something worth that's not making money?" So, and I was just getting out of the hole of the 75. I was only a real estate agent for like 3 years, and I just starting to get out of the hole. My last deal to get out of the hole, where there was a guy, I know I'm going to screw his last name up. His name was John. I called him John the Greek. It was John Terziakis. And Mike LaChance knows him well. He had horses with Mike LaChance, with Patrick. Great guy. Great. Oh, he had horses with Luke also, Luke Wallet. But really great guy. And he owned a diner in Queens. And he said to me, he says, "Joe, I get these cards from this guy, and it's a real estate, and they want to buy my diner. He works with McDonald's and so and so." So he said, "Why don't you call him? I know nothing about commercial." And to give you a good example, it's like going from training a harness horse to a thoroughbred, two different animals. Same thing with commercial, totally different animal. I know nothing about it. So, and like I said, I'm in the business like maybe 3 years. He says, "I want you to be there. I would feel better. You would make some money, and you would be on my side." I said, "Okay." So he gives me the card, and I said, "You know what? Maybe I can eat the whole pie." So I call up the McDonald's. It was on Sunrise Highway. So I call up the headquarters there and ask to speak to the CEO or the head guy there at that division, and can't get to him. I called like almost every other day for a month, couldn't get there, wouldn't pick up the phone. And I would always leave the message, "I got a building, I got a place, I got this." So the name of the guy was Alan Perfetta. And I said, "Let me call him up." So I called him up. I said, "Listen, I did lie to him a little bit." I said, "My uncle, John, got your card in the mail." what can we do? He said, well, split the commission. I said, all right, it was good that I did it this way. So 3 days later, we're sitting with this guy that I was trying to get in McDonald's. I left messages every other day. 3 days later, we're sitting there and we put the deal together. And I knew I was in over my head because I had no clue what was going on. And I decided, just shut your mouth, sit back and listen. So that's what I did and made the deal. And that's what I had, like maybe 20,000 left on the credit cards. And I got like, I don't know, $30,000 commission. And I paid that off and I was, you know, and I never looked back from then on. But
all right, what do you think? What do you think now that you're back involved? And my only advice to you is buy a house, not a horse. But aside from that, what do you think the state of harness racing is today? Oh, we lost your voice again. We lost them again.
No comment.
Why does that happen? Anyway, we'll go. Michael, thanks for hanging in there.
No, this is all great stuff. I mean, great stuff. I mean, these stories. I could tell you a story. I hope he can hear this. I was working at Sportsman's Park in 1995, and there was a girl named Liz Quisnell, and she had 2 horses.
He's going out and coming back in.
Okay.
And Chippy's Ruler. So she had 2 horses.
Michael, why don't you? Does it involve Joe?
It's about his son.
Okay, wait till he comes back on. It should happen in a minute.
Well, I'll tell you guys while we're waiting for Joe to come back on. You know, I first met Joe back in the early 70s. My dad had sent me up to Monticello with 5 or 6 horses, and we couldn't get in at Monticello because
Joe,
of the stake races.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
So we couldn't get in because of the stake races. Joe, I'm telling him how I first met you. And so I ended up at that place called the Ponderosa. Dominic Macedonia owned the place.
Oh, boy.
And so Joe Ricco was there with his stable. John Barchi was there with his stable. A guy named George Shade was there. And who else was there? Jimmy Marone was there. And
you know who was there? Donald Prusak.
Yeah, Don Prusak was there too. That was we were all there at this little. I think we were the only trainers there, but that was a fun time. That's the first time I met Joe, and then his father had that restaurant over there, Ricco's Italian restaurant. Loved the Italian food over there, and at Ricco's is where I met Trade Martin for the first time when Trade Martin was performing there for doing a benefit for. Preston Burris's daughter who had cancer at that time, and they were doing a fundraiser for her. I remember that. So those were early 70s.
Yep.
Joe, Michael got a story he wants you to hear. Go ahead, Mike.
Not exactly a story, but I was working at Sportsman's Park in 95, and there was a girl named Liz Quisnell, and she had 2 horses, Ruler's Chippy and Chippy's Ruler, and they were both Breeders' Crown horses, and George was driving for her, and they were quite a story. So I asked him if I could bother him, before the races.
George,
and the thing
talking about, right?
Yeah.
And the thing that stays with me 30 years later is how incredibly polite he was to somebody he didn't know. Mm-hmm.
The best compliment I ever got is I drove for Mike Taub a lot. He's the one that made me leading driver in Monticello in '78 because he had a good stable. I had a decent stable, but he had some good horses. He just put me down on. He was just a very good friend. And when I was out of the business, he ended up putting George down on a horse. George came from New England down to Freehold, and he put George on some horses. And Mike called me up one day and he says, I can't believe it. He says, George won with my horse. He got off the bike and everything he said sounded like you. And I said, that's a great compliment. I and that's before he was George Brennan, but I said, that was a great compliment. Now, yeah, he's a good person. Very good person.
Yes, very much.
Yeah.
All right.
So, Larry, I lost you when you said you had advice for me.
Yeah, the advice is buy houses, not horses.
Oh, okay. You're 1,000% correct. I remember you texted me. I put on Facebook that I bought a colt from George Teague, and you said, Joe, calm down, don't get crazy, because you know how this business is and this and that. And that horse I sold to the Amish.
Yeah, that's it's. I know how even today I would love to get back in. It's just very addicting, and to me it's like a challenge, and I love the action and everything else. But you know, the state of the business, the way it is now, and what you have to. First of all, it's not a level playing field. That's first of all. Second of all, the odds are so against you in every other way, even if it was a level playing field. And then to go to a sale and buy a yearling, and then there's 30, 40,000 in stake payments, and one or two out of them just make enough money to get even with the stake pay. It's such a losing situation. And I'll never forget because there was a time when I had 7 very, very wealthy owners, and it was basically the same thing that John Sessa says to Alan Sewall one day. He says, all right, he says, I just come from my accountant. He says, I could lose between $500,000 and $600,000 a year. So watch the vet bills. And that's what he was used to. Just loved racing, you know, and he'd spend $200,000 for a horse just to get a pass to get in the racetrack and a sticker so he could park the car. I mean, crazy. And like I told Billy O'Donnell last week that Kadish, who was a billionaire, when they gave him that plaque for Horse of the Year for Gay Snell, he went up on a stage, me and him, and he started crying. They gave him a $3 plaque. Here's a guy worth $1 billion more. And he started crying. So I know how addictive it is. And there really is nothing like seeing your horse cross the finish line. And I told that story once about when I bought Mr. Spindletop from the guy who owned Joe Marsh. He owned a Spindletop restaurant in Manhattan. And he owned 2 horses, Mr. Spindletop and Spindletop Joe. And I bought Mr. Spindletop because he wanted $25,000 for Spindletop Joe and $12,000 for Mr. Joe's off again.
Yeah, he's coming back. He's going back out and coming back in.
Oh, all right. So anyway, I don't have to continue that story, but it's just very addictive, and I hope Joe sounds like he's in pretty good shape now. He's 71 years old. There you are. Why does that keep happening, Joe?
It's not working this time. Hi, Joe. We'll start using sign language. You're up.
Okay, before let's see. Michael, you sent me an email that there was some things in that email that sounded very exciting that you're going to talk about now, right?
Sure.
Okay. Let's just, wait a minute. Joe's coming back on at the stage. Can you hear us now?
Yes, I got you.
Why does that
Don't
keep
touch
happening,
anything?
Joe?
Larry, don't you touch anything?
Joe,
don't you touch anything?
I don't know. Maybe the Wi-Fi or something's getting screwed up. I don't know.
All right, Michael, Joe, just hang in there. Michael's has to say a couple of things pertaining to the. Go ahead, Michael.
I just think that the business has a chance to do something because there is a lot of money around. Let me tell you, there is a fortune going around, and for the people that are just coming into that money. I know there's the stock market, and obviously nobody can match the thrills of the stock market, especially the last 3 or 4 days. But people are looking for the next thing to do, enjoyment-wise. I don't think bars are going to be it. I don't think movies are going to be it. And I do think racing is something where if we can get a clean slate here and figure out how to get people into the business and enjoy themselves, I think this business has a huge chance, especially with what's happening in Kentucky on the thoroughbred side and the standardbred side. I mean, Ray Pollock was an excellent writer, used to be the editor of the Blood Horse, ran a story today about how strong the standardbred business is in Kentucky. So there are things happening on the outlier that I think can get a lot of people into the business if we do things correctly.
A funny story about Ray Pollock, in case you guys don't know, he actually went to high school with Delvin Insco, Del's son.
Mm-hmm.
And I only found that out because I was talking with Ray, there's a couple months ago, and he basically brought that up, and basically he actually went to high school with Delvin Insco, which is Ole Insco. So
he's a great writer, and yeah. He's not afraid to get into controversial topics, which put him at the top of the heap if you're a gambler or want to know the inside of some things. Like he was very much on top of those indictments 5 years ago. Even people that just love horse racing, I mean, it's an extraordinary sight. Pollock Report, you should be on it.
But what about harness racing? All right, it's going to be it's going to be okay in Kentucky. What about all the rest of the tracks where all of these guys, and I'll just use Monticello is just for the sake of this conversation, but there's probably 10, 15 tracks like Monticello that the guys that are there, the drivers and trainers and owners are just right at the poverty line. And once they, probably the best thing in the world for them is do what like Joe did. But you get just leave the business, but you get so addicted and it just becomes it becomes a way of life. Now, once reality sets in, especially because between the decoupling of the racetracks from the casinos, that all that money is going to go away. The states are not going to chip in. All of these smaller racetracks are going to go away. There's going to be 1 or 2 states, and this is just my opinion, and I could be wrong. Michael, you know a whole lot better than me. There's going to be 1 or 2 states that will probably flourish. And what about all the rest of them? So if that's what's going to happen, if everybody is going to fight and this was said many, many times on this podcast when you and John Campbell were on, that they believe harness racing, even with the decoupling, harness racing will survive, but maybe in 2 states. Why are you guys fighting so hard to lose 90% of the racetracks and put 90% of the... I understand why you're doing it, and it's very noble that you're doing it, but once that happens, all of these guys up in Monticello, what the hell are they going to do? And there's maybe 15, 20 other tracks like that, drivers and trainers and everything that are just gonna have to find new jobs. And I'm sure guys like Joe's son, George Brennan, he's going to wind up in Kentucky probably, and that's where all the money's
he'll wind up retired.
He'll retire.
Yeah.
So and then there's going to be probably guys like George Brennan's caliber. They're all going to wind up in Kentucky, maybe 1 other track that's going to race, and the other 3,000, 4,000 drivers and trainers at all these smaller tracks are going to be out, and that's the positive sign. So it's like fighting. It's like fighting. It's like almost a lost cause, in my opinion, and it's noble because but you're saving 10% of the sport, and the rest of it is going down the drain. Like there's 2-3 guys called me up and says, yeah, everything they said is true, but what the hell's going to happen to me? I have 10 horses. I have this, and the same thing with the thoroughbreds, So I don't know. It's just a tough game. And that's why my recommendation to Joe Ricco is buy houses, not horses. Stop with the yearlings and stop with all of that nonsense. Just forget about it. That's my opinion. And if I did have a voice to all the trainers at all these smaller tracks, I would tell them just start downsizing and look for other work, because the inevitable is going to happen in probably 2 years. And
Larry, I'm just going to jump in here. The little guys can't compete against the super stables anymore. The super stables just dominate the sport. And so the little guys, they're racing for 4th, 5th, and even 6th money. I mean, you don't get paid for 6, but they just don't have a shot. You're in overnight races, racing against 3 horses from a super stable, 2 horses or 4 horses, or you got 3 entries in there. You got 0 shot. And the top drivers now, because we use catch drivers for the most part, the top drivers are going to take the super stables over the smaller guy. And so the smaller guys just have no shot anymore, 0.
Well, you might have to come to a part where you have to be more creative, because you might have to reinvent this sport. I know in California, for the thoroughbreds, they were trying non-winners of 1 for yearlings that are under 20,000, non-winners of 1 for stables of 10 or less, to get the smaller people to be able to compete. I mean, there's no way that you're going to buy a cheap yearling and you're going to show up at Santa Anita and go against Bob Baffert. I mean, it's ridiculous. So they realize it, and we should realize it too. So maybe we need just more creative conditions.
I'm going to repeat that, like have a race for stables of 10 horses or less. The trainer having 10 horses or less, correct?
Correct. So all of a sudden now, those stables, there's certain races, those stables that you're talking about, the power stables, can't enter.
Right.
So, and you have to get the maidens to a point where, I'm not saying that, we talked about it 2 weeks ago. It's like, I'm not saying that you can be Churchill and your maiden's going to go for 122,000, but you have to get these maidens to a point where somebody can come in and take a shot with a cheaper yearling. And maybe if they get to non-winners of 2, they can get that money and talk their owner going back to the sale and buying another yearling. But the yearlings have to go for, the non-winners of 1 and non-winners of 2 have to go for more money if you're going to get people into the yearling game.
You're talking about thoroughbreds now, right?
No, I'm talking about harness racing. It's like last year. Now it's a new track, and Kentucky's got resources that a lot of people don't have. But at Oak Ridge, those last week or last 3 or 4 weeks, non-winners of 1, 2-year-olds going for 25,000. Non-winners of 1, everybody's going to get interested. I'm not saying it's Saratoga where people are going to go, well, if it's going to go for this much money, I'm going to break my maiden at Saratoga, right? Or at least I'm going to try. Well, if you're going to swing everybody to the yearling game, the people on the bottom of that, the people that buy the cheaper yearlings, have to be able to go back to the sales. Everything can't be a model where your eventual outcome here is 12 trainers who are training everything. The bottom has to exist if this is going to work.
Right.
And I'll tell you what, you need less racing to jump up the bottom purse, because realistically, I mean, these purses need to be more. They have to be more. So if the way to do that is less racing, then obviously some people aren't going to survive this, but the ones that do at least can make a living.
Yeah. All right.
We lost Joe again.
Yeah, but
I think he's having some problems. I think you're
back, right? Now listen, while we're talking, I got like 100 comments that come in and maybe some questions for Joe or Michael or Freddy. So as we're talking, let me ask you a question. I put this up. Can you guys see this? Hello, yes. Larry, Freddy, and Joe. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just gonna put them up as we go, and any questions that come up, we can answer. So Angel said, hello, Larry, Freddy, and Joe, and Michael. She forgot Michael. Okay. All right. So, okay, let's see. Good guy, Joe. Tom Lusty says, good guy, Joe. Yes, he is a good guy. He is really a good guy. And once again, I'll never forget. And Michael, you weren't here when I said this. I was probably, I had many low times in my life, but there was a time when I was really broke. And Joe remembered the time. I didn't think he would, because I had no idea what year it was, anything. And I was standing there, and Joe said it. I didn't know. I was selling a watch or something. I had no money, and I went to Joe, and according to him, and I says, you want to buy? How much you want for it? 100. And Joe put the 100 in my pocket, and he says, keep the watch, or something like that. But it was like $100 million at the time. And I always mention that, and I always talk about Joe, because that's it's when you're down and out and in the street and starving, and somebody gives you that money, you just never forget it. And that's one of the things I will never forget. I can't remember one race I was in with Joe. I can't remember any of the stories that he may tell about Joe, including the one that he told. I don't remember anything. What I mentioned about Joe was because I got it off the computer. I had no idea that he was leading driver. At that time when he was leading driver, I was fighting for my life. So, I don't know. But one thing I'll never forget is that 100 he put in my pocket and just walked away. Okay. So yes, he is not only a good guy, but a really a nice guy, a good guy, a good father. And hi, Larry and gentlemen. Okay, Sundance. Okay, here's Eddie. Hi, Joe. Eddie, long time, my friend. That's Eddie. I don't know if you remember him, Eddie.
Oh, I know Eddie, and Joe Garino. I listen to them guys all the time. When you're on your show, I listen to them all the time.
Joe's a really nice guy too. Joe's a nice guy.
Joe's a. When Joe became leading trainer and stuff at Yonkers, I was out by then. I was trying to sell real estate at that point.
Okay. Let's see, Tom. This is why producers, directors, and sound engineers have You're right. But this is not my fault. This is Joe Ricco's fault.
I think it is.
Something on his end, the speed or something. Now, this used to happen to me all the time.
Jinx it, Larry. We got him talking now.
I'm gonna tell Joe why this is happening, because it happened to me when I had the studio downstairs in my basement. This used to happen all the time. Then my friend put up the thing where I could test the speed of the internet that's coming in. And the internet down there was like 50, 60, then it dropped down to 20, and then I lose the picture. So I moved the studio from downstairs up here where the main stuff is. Now the speed of my computer is 500, 600, 700, and I never lose anything. So when, like what's happening to Joe, it's because he's losing the speed, and it fluctuates, and when it goes down, that's when we lose them. So
I'll get that fixed for next time.
The router, it's the router. You got to put the router.
That's a plan, Joe.
Go with the router. Yeah, we got to have all you guys come on, because we got to tell some of these stories. Some of the stories, I got a million stories, but I can't tell. I can't.
Hey, Larry, I wanted to comment about when you talked about the guy crying when he got the $3 trophy.
That was Larry Kadish.
All right. How the sport grabs you.
Oh, let me finish that story before you start.
Sure. Go ahead.
Joe Marsh, who owns Spindletop Restaurants, he had 2 horses for sale, Mr. Spindletop and Spindletop Joe. Spindletop Joe he wanted $25,000 for. So I bought Mr. Spindletop for $12,000. The following week, they're both in the same race at Freehold. My partner, who I think you might know him, Joe, Don Catarano, the big Don, him and me own Mr. Spindletop. And he was in the dining room, and Joe Marsh, the owner of Spindletop Joe, was sitting at the next table. At the top of the stretch, me and Spindletop, I was driving Mr. Spindletop, and I think somebody was driving Spindletop Joe. We were head and head down the stretch. Now, the rest of the field was 10 lengths back. Donald told me that Joe Marsh, who owned Mr. Spindletop Joe, now here's a guy who's a multi-millionaire, owns Spindletop Restaurant in Manhattan, very, very wealthy guy. He jumped on the chair and rooting and screaming and yelling. Just as we hit the wire, we were still nose to nose. And just as we hit the wire, Don said that he collapsed. He fell. He wound up dying of a heart attack right there. That's how exciting this sport gets. And so I can understand how Joe can get back involved and everything. But, you know, it's I don't know. You know, the funny part, there's going to be a time, and I'll probably know in the next month. I have a couple of people I'm going to go to because I may wind up financing my movie or the TV series, because I think the movie is going to come and then the TV series. That's if I live long enough. So Hollywood has taken so much time because first it was COVID, then they had the actor strike, then the writer's strike, then the union strike, and now AI come into the picture. So they're striking about that. They're not buying up anything. They're going back to reality shows. And so it's a very long process. And I'm getting so tired of hearing, I love the stories, I love the story. How much closer can you get than having Nicholas Pileggi, who wrote Casino, Goodfellas, and all of them movies? How much closer can you get than him writing the everything, and then they still say, well, you know, the budget for each episode is $5 million when we can do a reality show for $200,000 an episode, and that's what I'm dealing with. So I may try to wind up getting the money myself. So I can go to 3 or 4 people that would spend millions on horses, but wouldn't invest in movies, knowing that
throw a horse in on the side.
Just because of the excitement, the thrill of it, and that's the horse business. You can't get away from it. Okay, for Joe, where were you racing against Walter Case? If yes, tell us your impression of him. Did you ever race against Walter?
I raced against him at Yonkers and Roosevelt. I just saw, because I'm friends with him on Facebook. I was never very close to him. Hello, goodbye. I never had dinner with him or anything like that. He just got into Plain Ridge, I believe.
Yeah, they finally let him in. Yeah,
let him in there. Incredible driver, incredible. You know, anytime somebody can do something you can't do, you're in awe. And I've never seen anybody that I've raced against, and I've raced against Carmine, O'Donnell, Campbell, Lucian. I mean, Buddy Gilmore. Buddy Gilmore was greatest. He was great. Hervé, but Walter Case, I've never seen a guy that can get a horse from 0 to 100 in a second. It doesn't make sense. I was talking to Sonny Patterson a while back, and I told him, I said he can get an elephant to pace in 28 seconds. Because elephants pace, giraffes pace. He would get an elephant to pace. I never seen a guy can get speed. I don't know how he did it. He could get speed out of a horse.
Hey, Joe, didn't you win a race on an elephant?
I did. That's how I know they pace.
I know.
I raced Gary Messenger in Monticello down the stretch. But no, I didn't win. I got beat. Gary beat me. But I had the exacta, Larry.
Good.
No, but the Walter Case, great.
Joe, there's a question for you here. Joe, George Brennan is your stepson. Do you know why he left the Meadowlands to focus on Yonkers?
I do. I knew 100%. The Meadowlands was going 2 nights a week. Yonkers was going 5 nights a week. And he was able to make more money.
Good reason.
He started, and when he went there, he just started doing super. I think it was like 2012 or 13 or something like that.
What was that bullshit thing he had with Gorell? Why did Gorell throw him out? What, you know about that?
Yes. There was nothing that was done wrong. He was leading driver at the Meadowlands. He left to go to Yonkers because the Meadowlands cut down to two nights a week, and Gorell was not happy that he left. And that was the argument.
Also, you have to remember that in 2011, there was talk that the Meadowlands was going to close when George made his move to Yonkers.
Yeah.
And Gorell came in at the last moment and bought the Meadowlands or leased the Meadowlands. But the talk in 2011 was Governor Christie was trying to close the Meadowlands.
Yes. Yeah. So that's the only reason why he left the Meadowlands. Because he lives in Freehold, it's a lot less commute. He doesn't have to go over the bridge, but at Yonkers, he was able to make more money.
Gary D writes, great show, Larry, with the crew. This is a good crew. Okay. Angel, hello, son. No, she's talking back and forth with Sundance. Nobody likes Jesse Black. Nobody liked Bergamo. I hated his guts. And if it wasn't for Charles Slutsky, if it wasn't for my friendship with Charles Slutsky, Bergamo would have had me thrown out of here. Between Bergamo and Dubin and they would have had me thrown out of there. And as soon as Slutsky died, they got the job done. But he was
a quick story on Bergamo. I was 18 years old. And one time he told somebody he signed for my license. That's bullshit. He didn't. But I was up in Foxborough at 18. I just turned 18, and I got my qualifying license there. A really good judge. His name was Chet Boyle from New England. He signed my license, and I went down to Monticello. My first drive at Monticello, he called me in. Move your handholders up. Can you imagine? He's rolling over in his grave right now the way these handholders are. I had to move my handholders up. Yeah, he was. Another time I had a horse, Best of Gold, and I did very well with him. He was a good horse. And Monticello would close, and I would go down to the Meadowlands. I couldn't do any good at the Meadowlands, and I didn't have the stock for the Meadowlands. And I used to always kid around. That was the Meadowlands Shuffle. Every time somebody would pull and I had to close a hole up, my horses from Monticello, that was one move. They moved again, closed the hole up, that was 2 moves, I was done. There was nothing I could do. So I raced this horse, Best of Gold, and coming down a stretch, he's like 10th. And I didn't even ask him to go on. He was going to finish 10th no matter what. So I finished a bad 10th. I put him in at Monticello. I bet the horse to win, and he wasn't a first over horse, but he was a decent horse. I got away 3rd, and I got boxed in with him. Now I lost my money. Bergamo calls me in and says, "I want to see you tomorrow." What? And I was like a goody two shoes. He calls me in. He thought I did something wrong with the horse. I can't tell him I bet him, and he was a pain in my side from day one. I never.
He's a bad guy, and I don't only hate him for what he did to me, but he hurt and buried a lot of good people, a lot of good trainers, a lot of good drivers. And it seemed that he picked on the Italian kids just more than anybody else. And I'm not prejudiced. I could give a fuck less, but he was the one that sigged in the 70s. They come up with the politicians. They had no more room to put retired cops and everything, so they formed a new organization called Harness Track Security, and Pagamo sigged them on me, and they were on me 24 hours a day. He was just a bad guy, and I hate to talk about the dead, but he killed a lot of good people and hurt a lot of guys like yourself. He was on me. He was on me pretty good, but he was on me for things I didn't do. So I kind of evened it off for the things I did do that he didn't, that he couldn't get me on. But he was not a nice guy.
Well, you're talking about Herman Kluge and them guys. They were ex detectives, and then they became
Yeah. They Harness Track Security.
Yeah,
they were formed to find undisclosed ownership in harness racing. Now I'm going to tell you a real quick story. I think I might have told this once before. They formed Harness Track Security to find undisclosed ownership in harness racing. Now let me tell you this story. I was barred from Yonkers, but I got a horse to bet on. So I went there that night, and I was with a girl, and we're sitting in the dining room. One level up, 2 levels up from the window, from the glass, right by the finish line. So I'm sitting there, and we ordered, and who comes walking down but John Gotti and 3 of his guys. He walks down. Hi, Larry. Hi, John. Hi, guys. And they walk down to the first level, 2 levels down. Now I'm looking at the track, but I guess you know what I'm talking about. You can see the reflection from the glass window, from the window. You see the reflection. So I says to the girl I'm with, I says, you see them guys standing up there? We're looking at the reflection now. They're Harness Track Security. They probably followed me here. They want to see, whatever. And oh no, I says to them, that's Harness Track Security. They probably came here for me, but they're gonna have to throw him out because the racetrack will lose their license if they have any bad people here. So sure enough, here they come. They come walking down, and you know who they threw out? Me. They come to my table, and they threw me out. John Gotti stayed there with 3 guys that killed a total of 100 guys, and they threw me out.
Larry, did they force you to pay the bill, or did you get to leave without paying?
No, I told them no. They just says, "Come on, let's go. We'll take care of it," and I had to leave, and that was it. Okay. Hi, James. Okay, let's see. Larry, did you ever make enough money in 1 week to pay off Bobby Cabert? Somebody asked me that question, and no, I never did, because no, the answer is no, I never did. I come close a couple of times, but never did. And the only reason I wind up getting even with him is because Barney Cutler died and left. That's the whole story. But no, I wind up getting even with him in 1978. The year that I left, the year Joe was leading driver up there is the year that I left. I got even with everybody, and Charles Slutsky helped me get a bunch of horses, and that's what I did, and I wind up at okay. They see the comments but don't like the questions. They ain't gonna say anything about George Brennan and the Meadowlands. Now wait, let's analyze this. They see the comments, so he's talking to somebody else. They see the comments but don't like the questions. That's not true. John Joseph, that's not true. Don't be a computer wise guy or whatever you guys call it. That's not true. I put every question up. I only took one question down in all the podcasts. And the one question I took down was last week when Billy O'Donnell was on, and the question was, ask Billy if he ever fixed any races. And I put it up and I took it right down. And I said, Billy, you don't have to answer that. That's the only time. And all I ask on this podcast is to be respectful and everything else. So John Joseph, I see the questions, and as long as they're respectful, and the answer that Joe gave about George Brennan was 100% true. There's a little caveat to go with that because George made a comment that another driver was going to get get in a lot of trouble, and Gural didn't like that statement, which Gural wound up apologizing for, and that was like a bullshit thing. But the main reason was that George Brennan was driving a horse in every race at Yonkers. Meadowlands was Meadowlands was going to close. They were talking about closing, and they were only racing 2 days a week. That's the reason. So John Joseph, don't be a computer. That's not true what you said. So
Larry, don't worry about it. People are going to make their own comments and whatever they.
Yeah, but it's fucking bullshit. It's bullshit. It's nonsense. You just
Larry, move on to the next question.
It gets me so fucking aggravated. Time says, "Oh, it's because of you that harness racing is failing." Yeah, okay. I think the first sentence in my book was, "I didn't invent corruption. It was there when I got there." It just gets me mad. Okay, Eric, to John Joseph, I'm trying to confirm. I heard it was the purses were higher, and Eric, you're right. The purses were higher, but what Joe said is also true. They were racing only 2 days a week, and just like Michael says, there was word that the mayor. Governor wanted to close the racetrack, so it was a combination of a few things.
He wanted to close Monmouth also.
Yeah, he did.
He wanted to get out of the racing business.
Yeah. Okay. So Eric, you don't have to just listen. Just believe me and Joe. Okay. John Joseph, Yonkers, yes, purse is better. At the Meadowlands, the winner only gets 46% of the purse, and the driver gets 5%. What's that mean? Yonkers, yes.
That's the new thing now, Larry. They're paying everyone down, whoever races now, so that you're not getting 50% now. You're getting 46%.
Let me ask a question for somebody in Chicago. What does it cost to ship a horse with a trailer from New York to the Meadowlands and back? I mean, what does it cost to race a horse? Between the tolls, the gas. If somebody's going to paddock your horse, all the incidentals.
Yep.
I mean, somebody's got to look out for these small people. I mean, at what point, if you don't make better rules, at what point do you have 10 trainers all training 200 horses? Does that make any sense to anyone? You have to do something so these people can survive.
All right, Joe Guarino writes in. Bergamo was the most corrupt judge ever. I left him $1,500 to pay Aaron Rosenthal, and he never gave it to him. Good to see you, Joe. Glad you're doing well.
I love Guarino, man. He tells it the way it is.
Yeah, he's no nonsense. His father's 90 years old, and he just got in a base. Just survived knee operations and a couple of other problems that happened because he was laid up. And then he was just getting over all of that. And the first day he was going out, getting his own medicine and everything, and he got in a bad car accident. He went through the windshield. He cracked his head open. He broke his shoulder. He's in the hospital, and he was in intensive care. They took him out. And this afternoon, I talked to Joe, and he said they brought him today to rehabilitation. So I wish him all the best. But Joe, as far as a good stand-up guy, Joe's a good stand-up guy. And someday, and I told Joe the other day, I says, you know, you got to tell some of your stories, because somewhere along the line, and I hope I'm saying this right. I know he's listening, and I hope I don't say this where he gets mad at me. But somewhere, Joe and me, there were 3 or 4 people in the world that probably could survive what I survived, and the amount of money, and Joe is one of them. Not only was the dollar amounts basically the same in the millions, but he survived it, and I survived it. The other 2 did not. But somewhere along the line, Joe turned his life around, and right now he's like born again. I don't know what you call it, but he's just a stand-up, just a good guy.
Good for him. Good for him.
Okay. Hey, Larry, can I be the positive storyteller here? And I'll wind it back to the 3 of you, because I think everybody's interested to know what the 3 of you think. Well, you were talking about the guy that was crying about the $3 trophy, right? Well, if you go back to the 70s, there's a story about Secretariat on Sports Century. ESPN did fabulous. Well, in that story, after Secretariat, Jack Nicklaus, the golfer, called Haywood Hale Broun, the journalist, and he said, "You were at the Belmont, you saw it." He says, "Yes." And Nicklaus says, when he was coming down the stretch, I started applauding, and I started to cry. And Haywood Hale Broun said, I'm paraphrasing slightly perhaps, he says, "Don't you understand?" He says, "Your whole life, you've been looking for perfection. And at the end of the Belmont, you saw it." In the 70s, Secretariat started that generation of 73 was Secretariat, Forgo was 74, Seattle Slew 77, Triple Crown Affirmed 78, Spectacular Bid in 79. But in the 80s, because the Meadowlands had just jump-started the sport so much, you saw Niatros in 80, Camfella in 82 and 83, On the Road again in 84 and 85, Annihilator in 85, Forrest Skipper in 86, Matt Lobel in 87, Matt Scooter in 88 and 89. What was that like?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm a little different. Let me just tell you about me, because Joe mentioned it. Joe mentioned it earlier. I don't know if you were on when he mentioned it, but what he said was, Larry always looks the same. Larry, I could be sitting here and I'd have 100,000 on the Super Bowl, and they'd be at the 1 yard line, and if they get in, I win the bet, and if they don't get in, I lose the bet. And regardless what happens, I sit just like this, and whatever happens after it's over, win or lose, I get up, and you'll never know. When I won the Cane Pace, not only did he just win the Cane Pace, it made no difference to me what race he won, but the first race, the first heat, I believe he paid $48, and we had, me, Davey, and Aaron had 3,000 to win on him. And then we bet in the final, we bet 1,000 each again, and he paid, I think $18. So I was counting the money. I win like 50, 60,000 that day. And I never went to the winner's circle. I didn't care about the winner's circle. I didn't care about the Cane Pace ring. I didn't care about nothing. Just give the money, and let's, and maybe we could do the same thing. Now, I'm going to tell you something I never told anybody except Benny Webster. I don't think I ever told anybody. I win the Cane Pace. And now Morty Finder comes to me. He was the owner of Pine Hollow Stud Farm. And he was good friends with Davy Handel, who was part owner of the horse. After we won the Cane Pace, Aaron, the owner of the horse, Aaron Wagman, Big Willie Farms, he gave me and Davy each, we were 3 partners. He gave us each a third of the horse. So he made us partners there because he was a very wealthy guy. Anyway, so now we have to go to the Delaware, Ohio for the jug. So now I won't go through the whole story. I'll just say this: in the final, Benny Webster had the rail with Seahawk, I think, and I had the 2-hole. And I went over the Benny, and I was supposed to go over the Benny. This was the plan we made after we won the first heat and knew we were going to be in the final. Because if we won the jug, Morty Finder, who owned Palo Hollow So, was going to give us $3 million for the horse. Now I owned a third of the horse, so now I was going to get $1 million there because I was sure he was going to win the jug. I was going to get $1 million there, plus the purse money, plus the bet, plus everything. So after the first heat, I knew I was going to be in, and the plan was to go to Benny and say, Benny, me and Davey and Aaron were going to put up $100,000 each. I went to Benny. I was supposed to go to Benny and say, Benny, here's $300,000. You don't have to. All I want to do, you got the rail. I know you're going to take me. You're going to try. This horse can't race, and you know that. You're going to try to put me in the hole. Here's $300,000. Let me go before the quarter pole, and after that, if you can beat me, beat me. And that was the race where they had the wreck, and Seahawk broke it. I mean, anyway, but that was that. I don't know why I told that story, but anyway. Okay, let's see.
Hey, Joe, get us back on course here. In the 80s at the Meadowlands, what was it like when harness racing was elevated to the level that it was at the 80s at the Meadowlands?
Well, I've never seen anything like that. It was like first class. It's almost like we used to go into the paddock. You could eat whatever you want. You could get a massage. They had steam rooms. The lounge area was fantastic. You were treated like royalty. It was fantastic. As far as racing, it was something you had to get used to. For someone like me that was coming down periodically, it's a little tough. You got to be racing there, and you got to pick up the rhythm of it, and you got to know what was going on. There was a lot of movement, more so than today. And if you had a horse on a half-mile track, I believe you had to have a starter to get him to learn to stretch out like that, because you got to carry that speed a little bit longer. But it was a fun time. First time I raced there, I raced a horse, Mr. Montgomery. It was a cheap horse that some farmer had. One horse he had, Mr. Montgomery. And I raced him at Monticello. It was 86, the year they opened. No, 76, when they opened the Meadowlands. And I raced him at Monticello and worked his way all the way up. He was in the open. I ended up winning the open with him, and then brought him the guy that trained him and owned him. He brought him to Pocono, and I won an open in Pocono with him. Then he wanted to try him at the Meadowlands as my first drive ever at the Meadowlands. And I got away like maybe 5th, and I pulled him at the half, just going a little bit before the half. And he was grabbing on 10-ton. And I was just sitting there with him, and I'm just, I'm talking to myself more than the horse, because my first time racing there. And I'm just saying, just easy, just keep the bit tight in his mouth, keep him strong. Don't just ride him. So I'm like 5th, I'm 4th. He's grabbing arms. Just sit there. You got time. We got a long way to go. We go into the turn. I'm 3rd. Just grabbing on. Like, good. He's really good. Just sit there. You got time. You got time. Don't. premature ejaculation. So I'm just sitting there, and we turned for home, and I just said, I turned him loose. He opened up 5 lengths, and I said, wow, this is easy. Halfway down the stretch, he started getting a little wobbly on me. About a 16th of a mile, I thought I was going to get run over. I looked down, the ground stopped moving, so I knew we were going slow. And the other 9 horses just like that. They just. I ended up going like this because I thought I was going to get run over. It's nothing like it. Back in them days, racing, the horses, the management, the drivers, everything was incredible. And the big thing that I believe, that made the Meadowlands, and I didn't really know him. I mean, I've met him, like I would walk in and stuff, is Joe DeFrank. He made the Meadowlands. I think some people should take a cue from him. If you had a license, if the state licensed you, you could race there. You got a Jersey license? Come on in. Because he knew you were either going to make it or get your ass kicked and get out. Johnny Campbell came there. He made it. Billy O'Donnell, he made it. I went there. I couldn't wait to leave. I mean, after a couple of days I was there, I left. I wanted to leave. I just had nowhere to go with a couple of nicer horses, and I raced them there. But tough place. But Joe DeFrank, you have a license by the state. The state regulates things. They gave you a license. You're good with me. Come on in. And I've never, Yonkers, Roosevelt, it was closed door. And to tell you the truth, it makes you wonder when a place is a closed door, why? Don't you want competition? So it makes you wonder why. That's all I'm saying.
All right. Vinny says, I just saw George Brennan go wire to wire in the 30,000 trot race at Yonkers. Okay, here's one for Michael. Michael, my dad and I went to Sportsman's Park every summer. Great racing. Here's another one. Michael, can you ask Joe what he thinks about the type of racing at Yonkers? Outside horses rarely leave. They go single file around the racetrack, and then at the 3/4 pole, the horse and the three-hole pulls. I don't know what that part meant, but
I got it, and I spoke to my son George about it. They basically race there like it's a 5/8. They don't pull until like the 5/8 pole, which would be the half if you want a 5/8 mile track. They race that way. I have a different opinion, but I'm old. I'm over the hill, and not these people. I think racing was a little bit better. It's always been lineup place, but today it's boring. You can actually, like, if I watch the replays, you can just fast forward to the 5/8 pole because nobody's pulling. Whatever they get away, they get away. Everybody gets a hole. You can't back down quarters. If you back down quarters, you're going to get days or suspended, or so they roll that quarter. What happens when you go a quarter? Let's say back when I raced, you go a quarter in 29 and 2. You go a half in 1-1. When you're backing that second quarter down, you're not fooling the top driver, but you're going to get drivers. The horse is grabbing on. They pull the right line. The only reason he's grabbing on is because everybody's backing into you, and they'll just pull the right line. But it kept things moving. There was action going on. It's the most boring racing I've ever seen. I only watch races that my son's in. If I don't see his colors, I barely watch it unless it's a top race, because it's boring. I don't gamble, but if I was going to spend the night at the track or something, I would go to the Meadowlands, take a couple $100. You can actually make money there. Yonkers is just, there's no handle, and the racing's horrible. I hate watching it. Too much.
Gary D says, is Joe thinking about getting a 25,000 claimer for his passion? I hope not, Gary D.
No.
Eric, to all of you, I always wondered of horses that run primarily in the daytime have any problems running at night under the lights or in front of bigger crowds? Well, any one of us can answer that question. I'll just give my opinion first. To all of the wonder about horse riding primarily in the daytime, all right, the problem, well, I can't even say the problem in the daytime is because of the sun and the shadows that happen, because they also have shadows at night because of the poles and the lights. So you can't say that. I never noticed, in other words, I never had a horse that raced better in the daytime than at night. There are some horses, and I think I had one that the lights really bothered him, and I just put them colored goggles on him, them yellow goggles, and that handed that. As far as the crowds go, sometimes early on, the standardbreds kind of get used to it, but the crowd noise in the heat of the race, it don't bother them, but in a post parade or something. So I don't know if I answered that question. Anybody want to answer that?
I'll jump in. I've never noticed anything difference between day and nighttime, but I have noticed something different with mutter. I've had some horses that raced average on a regular night, but on an off track, they were monsters. You couldn't beat them.
Yeah.
I wanted to say something about Yonkers too, and I don't disagree with anything Joe said, but every year, two of the best races of the year are the Matchmaker Final and the Levy/Borgata Final. I mean, they go for a lot of money, so there's a lot of movement early, and that race has had horses come from last. So when there's movement at Yonkers and you can close, and the race comes back to the closers, I mean, that's pretty exciting racing. The unfortunate part is they haven't been able to create that a lot. But because if they could, there'd be a lot more betting because people wouldn't hesitate to bet the 6, 7, and 8s that were closers, hoping that the speed would make the race collapse.
I agree with you, Michael, and I'm just thinking it could be part of it is you don't see that many holes being given out when they're going for 300,000, 500,000. You know, the 3 holes not opening up and the horse can get in a hole. So it makes where he's got to fight. He's got to get to the top. The guy's got to let him go. They're faster quarters. I do see some of that when it's bigger money. Them things start to be tightened up a little bit more.
I'm just saying because the young people in the business go, well, there's 8 horses. They don't go anything, so nobody's going to bet any money. But if you go back 40 and 50 years when there was movement in these races, even in the 80s, that you could close on the small tracks. But without horses being able to close, you really limit the imagination of the gamblers. I mean, I could tell you, and I'm sure you guys had the same thing. Maywood Park was in a big Italian neighborhood. So the old Italian guys would come in, buy the program, take the program, rip 6, 7, and 8 out of the program, throw it on the floor because they didn't even want to consider 6, 7, and 8. They just bet 1 through 5, and whatever happened. So
you also now have the longer bikes and the guys leaning back, which just adds more. So you got to weigh 8. You're like 5 or 6 more lengths back than you were 20, 30 years ago.
That's definitely a problem.
Well, I hate to keep saying that, because I don't know it. I'm just reiterating what my son has told me. When I raced at Yonkers, he said it was easier to go 3 wide down a backstretch. He said it's harder to go 3 wide and pass somebody down a backstretch. I said, why? He said, I don't know. I don't know. I watched it ever since he told me that, and it is hard. You don't see guys very rarely going 3 wide down a backstretch and just sweeping to the front. Where years ago you used to see that.
Hey, Joe, didn't you recently race a horse where you decided to drive with the handholds back further than you usually do, and you ended up on the other side of the gate?
Yes. I can't get used to putting my handholders back there. I just, I have them back further than I used to, but I can't get back like, I'm trying to emulate my son. I can't do it. It's impossible. I watch him and he leans back. I can't do that. I can't. He keeps telling me, you'll hold him, but I just don't feel comfortable. And it's not my business anymore, so I don't have to worry about it. And I don't want to drive for anybody else. So, you know.
And how many wins do you need to hit that 1,000 mark?
Oh, I'm about 16 away. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Joe, what you're talking about also at Yonkers is if the driver's perception is that you can't move early, you can't pull until you come around the third turn. Well, that's the way the racing is going to be then, correct?
Yes. Yeah, they're all in agreement on it. I mean, they all think that way, and evidently it must be true because these, you know, every now and then I do see somebody that pulls and he ends up the track, you know.
All right, Jesse Black writes, Herman Kluge was an ex-New York City police detective.
Yes.
He had a crew of ex-detectives who were referred to as Kluge's Stooges.
He's 100% correct. That's true. Yeah.
Let me tell you this story real quick because Herman Kluge. I was barred. I lost my license, and naturally they had if they took it away in New York, both tracks you couldn't race at neither track. So I was barred. I lost my license, so I was dead. That's when I start fighting everybody, and I wind up losing every decision. So what happened was I went to a party in California. I'm at the party in California, and my sister calls me up, and they says they're having a block party. All the kids that grew up together in the block, and they had a big block. Was about 20 of us. We all grew up together, all kids, and it's a get together like 50 years later. So I says, "Oh, I'm not coming home for that. So tell everybody I said hello." She calls me the next day and says, "Vinnie Hogan was there." Vinnie Hogan was one of my neighbors, and he says that I told him. He asked about you. I told him that you got barred for you got into the horse business and you got barred. She told him the whole story. He says, "Give him this number. Tell him to call me." So I call up.
Hey, Larry, I got to cut out here. And Joe, Michael, I got to go because I have a dog that needs to go out immediately.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead. You
Go
got
ahead,
it.
Freddy. I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Bye, Freddy.
Okay.
Okay, so now I call up and I hear Belmont Park, and I said, "I'm sorry, I must have the wrong number." I redial, and the same thing, Belmont Park, and I says, and I repeat the number, and she says, "You got the right number. Who are you looking for?" And I says, "I'm looking for Vinnie Hogan." She says, "Well, hold on," and she connects me to Vinnie Hogan, and I says, "Vinny, what are you doing there?" And he says, "Fly home and come and see me." So that's what I do. I fly back and I go see him at Belmont Park. He was a chief detective in New York City, and who was right underneath him was Herman Kluge. So he tells me, he says, "Do you want your license back?" And I says, "Yeah." So he says, "Your sister told me everything that you did and this and that." No, okay. So I says, "How are you going to do that?" And he says, how long have you been without a license?" I says, "I think 7 years, 8 years, something like that." So he picks up the phone, calls the racing commission. Receptionist answers. He says, "Give me Herman Kluge." Herman Kluge was underneath him. Vinny was his boss. So when they retired, they both retired together. They asked Vinny if he wanted the job as the racing commissioner, and he said no because he lived out on Long Island, and he says, "But give it to Herman Kluge, my good friend. He's retiring too." So they gave it to him. So Herman Kluge became the head of the New York State Racing Commission, and Vinnie Hogan, who was my neighbor, became head of security and mutuals at Belmont, Aqueduct, and Saratoga Racetrack. So I'm in his office now, and he says, he calls up the race. He gets Herman Kluge on the phone. He says, "Herman," he says, listen, if a guy don't have a license in the state for 5 years, does he need a renewal or a new application? And he says, well, he needs a new application, but who's it for? And he says, Larry Rolla. And he says, you know that this guy, and he says, just like this, he says, Herman, send the fucking applications over here to Belmont Park. He sent the applications over, and I filled them out, and I was licensed in New York State. Now, when I went to apply in Jersey, Sanzuki was the head of the commission in New Jersey, and he wouldn't give me my license. I says, why? They barred me in New York. You barred me for reciprocity. I says, but, he says, let me see the hearing. Let me see the hearing that you had in New York State before I give you a Jersey license. You had to have a hearing for them to reinstate you. Well, there was no hearing. There was a brown paper bag full of money, and there was no hearing. And he wouldn't give me a license. And I can't tell you what happened after that because Sanzuki's still alive. But I wound up with a Jersey license too. So that's the Herman Kluge story. Okay, and Herman and Kluge's Stooges. Okay, Larry, great show as always. Really good to see you. Joe, great memories and times we could never reproduce. Right. Thanks, Frank.
Yep, thanks, Frank.
Jesse Black, 58 watching now. Please spank. I'm supposed to say hit like and subscribe and all of that stuff. Has something to do with the algorithms. So I don't know what it does. But anyway, hit like and subscribe. It's for free, so just do it. Okay, who's the best driver? Carmine. That question I ask all the time. It's impossible to pick. I mean, how do you pick between Brennan and Campbell and O'Donnell and all these new kids that are out there? It's impossible. It's impossible.
Larry. Since you mentioned the new kids, just a suggestion. If you could get somebody like Brett
Beckwith.
This kid is incredible. I mean, I hear him. I don't know him, but I met him once. My younger son introduced me to him one day in a paddock in Monticello. Hello, that was it. But you should probably reach out and try to get him. You'll get him. Get him on the show. Talk about positive things about harness racing. Talk about his future because the game is left to him. This kid's the real deal. You know, I believe you know his grandfather.
Yeah, but I don't know the kid.
Well, you know when I say you know the grandfather, he has two grandfathers. I think you know his mother's grandfather, who is Jerry Silverman.
His mother's grandfather is Jerry Silverman?
His grandfather is Jerry Silverman on his mother's side.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Yeah.
So, I mean, you're friends with him. I'm telling you, that's where you got to go. You have to go to the future. Stop with the 70-year-old guys. We're just talking about the past. We got to bring everybody into the future and get them thinking that way. And maybe he can even bring like a younger guy that he knows from the Midwest, kind of mix things up a little bit, you know?
Yeah, I got to mix things up because first of all, Joe, just so you know, I was going to end this podcast after I went through the chapters in my book 100 podcasts ago. It's my friends that made me keep doing this and doing
That's
this.
Good.
I really don't want to do it, but now that after all the stuff I've been through, I'm stuck in the house. So now it becomes, well, at least
cathartic.
I have something.
Yeah.
I have something to do, but I would never ask anybody to come on any drive because of my reputation, and I didn't want to. I just never asked. It was Freddy that. No, what happened was Michael LaChance called me up one day. I haven't seen Michael and I don't even know the last time, and he says, "I heard you want to stop with the podcast and this." He says, "Don't do it." He says, "Don't do it. Let me come on. I want to come on. We'll talk. We'll have some fun and everything else." and he's the one. And then I got Billy O'Donnell, and then, you know, I won't ask. I make Freddy ask. I won't ask
Tell
because
Freddy to ask.
I'll be so disappointed because it happened to me 2 times. 2 guys, harness guys, that was supposed to come on, and the last minute they said they can't. And Jimmy Marone was one of them, and I can't mention the other kid. So I says, you know, fuck it, I ain't asking nobody. So Freddie basically said, all right, we lost Joe again. He moved something and we lost him. But anyway, that's it. Let me see. Let me get to some of these questions here. What is this? Larry, great shows. Oh, really good to see Joe. Great memories. We could never. Yeah, we went through that already. Okay, how about this one? Harness racing of the 80s to me was the best. It makes me sad that it's gone. You better get a booster in your.
I'm getting one.
You just gotta. What it is, it's a slow speed. You gotta either be next to the router. There's I think it's called a router.
I have a router upstairs.
That's the problem. That's why when I had it downstairs, so I brought the computer right in the same room as the router, and now from having a 20 internet speed, I'm up in the 700-800s. So that's
next time we'll do that.
Yeah.
But hard to stay with you, Larry.
Huh?
It's hard to stay with you.
Yeah. But I would say there's I don't want to give up on the business. I think there's still a chance. You know, I'm an optimistic person, and you know, it's a great sport. I think there's people out there. There's a way to get them there. I mean, if somebody can sell pet rocks and convince people to buy pet rocks, you can convince them to go to the harness racing tracks again. I don't know what it is, but I think you need somebody young that, you know, somebody fresh out of college that's in marketing that went to school for that. They're going to say, well, we need to get this app. We need to do AI. We need to things that we don't even know about. I mean, I have trouble being connected to you. So I think there's hope. The problem is the tracks, because of the gambling, they give us money, but they don't want to help us. They're just giving us money because they're forced to. So they're just hoping.
Joe, that's gonna end now. That's
what I'm saying. So what we have to do is think of a way. I don't know the way. I mean, I look at New York. We have 7 tracks in New York State. You know, the handle, if you did all 7 tracks, the handle's probably a good chunk of money. If every track in the country gave 1% out of the half from the horsemen, half from management, if every track gave 1% and they put that money in a pool and we marketed like the NFL does or Major League Baseball or hockey, have one group, you know, of people that handle the marketing. I can't believe with that kind of money, you're going to get people to want to go to the races, want to get involved. I don't know how.
Joe, let me say this. In the last 3 weeks, I had on this show here on Thursday night, I had Michael and 2 or 3 other people and John Campbell. And everything that you're talking about, they talked about. See that guy, Michael, that's in the next picture from you?
Yes.
That guy, John Campbell, refers to him when it comes to the best ideas ever solving the problems that you're talking about. It's that guy right there. And we did 2 podcasts with him, and he has great ideas. He didn't mention them tonight, but he has great ideas. So everything that you're saying is what we talked about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and they're trying to figure out a way how to do it. And who does everybody refer to? That guy right there, Michael. So
all right. The problem.
Easy.
the problem, the way I see it, is Michael's got great ideas. The problem is you have, like in New York State, you got seven tracks. They're all in a boat, and their oars are all different ways. Nobody's on target. Nobody's trying to get together and go as a group. And that's why no one's listening to Michael. If everybody got together, put Michael in charge to where he gets the marketing done. You have to market. You know, when I first got into real estate, I started hustling. I made money. Then I started marketing myself. I started taking the penny saver, taking ads out. You know, what's your distribution? No, I'm going to go here. I did all that kind of stuff. Then I got in it. Today, these young kids don't do that. They all market on Facebook, on it's all social media. Everything's social media. That's where they're getting all their customers from. So that's what we have to do. You know, the business has to work through social media. It's not just social media. And then you have to get some kid, some genius, and let him come up with a new idea. I don't know. I mean,
you got to go back. You got to go back 2 or 3 podcasts. Go back to the podcast where you see Michael and John. It's 2 or 3 podcasts back, and everything that you're saying, they discuss all of that, and everybody referred to Michael because he has the best ideas. But like John says, who's going to put up the money to do this, especially after the decoupling starts? It's very, very difficult. If anybody could do it, it's the crew that they got together now. So
let me just say this, Larry. I mean, everybody knows in the 80s everything was great, but then came lotteries, then came casinos. We didn't know how to market our sport, and obviously the results weren't optimum. But take a look at what's happening around us. I mean, alcohol sales are down. The young people, they don't drink the way they used to. They don't go to bars. The NBA ratings are very, very bad. Now, can they bounce back? It's possible. But it's like Soto just signed a deal for $600 million. How do people connect to this? And the greatest thing about our sport is that horses don't talk. So that if you make the horses the stars, nobody's going to hate horses. People love horses. They're the stars. Of course, we need human interest stories, but let's move this around so that the next time, 2000, we talked about it 2 podcasts ago. Lightning struck in 2022. Flightline, you know, when he won the Pacific Classic and the Breeders' Crown, and Bulldog Hanover. I mean, for a streak from July until the Breeders' Crown, I mean, he mesmerized everybody. We talked about how people stuck around till midnight at Dayton to watch that horse race. The next time lightning strikes, we need to be ready because we can capitalize on the great horse. Because I think you're going to be able to sell this sport in a way that nobody else can, because people are starting to get tired of professional sports, especially professional athletes.
I don't know if that's true or not, but
take a look.
Like, you know, it reminds me of like statements like that. That I remember I wanted to buy a disco, and it was about 2 years into the disco thing, and they said no, it's a fad. And it lasted another 10 years, so I don't know. I just know what the facts are, and the facts are decoupling is going to get rid of a lot of racetracks, and I think everybody agrees there's probably going to be only 2 or 3 in another 4 or 5 years. There's probably going to be only another 2 or 3 racetracks, and they're not going to be any place around here. And with all your good ideas, just like John Campbell says, they're great ideas, but where do you get the money?
Well, Michael's in the spot right now. He's in Kentucky. He's at Oak Grove, correct, Michael?
Yes, sir.
Yep. And Kentucky is the hot spot. Kentucky looks like the one that's going to survive if you go by states.
Right now,
states that are going to be surviving, Larry.
Well, I mean, the horse culture is huge in Kentucky. I mean, you need to read the story that Pollock wrote. I mean,
I read it. Steve Stewart sent it over to me today.
Site. I mean, it's a powerful story that people are starting to buy farms just the same way they used to buy farms in New Jersey when the Meadowlands opened.
How many harness tracks do you think they'd have in Kentucky?
How many?
Right now, there's three.
Three.
All right, so you're going to have every top driver, you're going to have all the drivers going to have to buy houses in Kentucky because that's the only place they go.
The purses are phenomenal. They're $80,000, $100,000 purses all day long.
And, really? And you have to remember, you've got the Red Mile. The Red Mile is just anybody that's been there. It's just a historical site. And if you're going to have racing at the Red Mile, all those championship races during the Grand Circuit, I mean, this is a wonderful place where you're going to bring people and you're going to want to go to those yearling sales and participate. Now, what has to happen to do that? Well, Kentucky's got the hard part figured out, the revenue part. So now what do we have to do? We have to restructure the business in a way where people want to be in the business. I mean, I heard you talking about golf. How many people do you know that spend $100,000, $200,000 a year on golf because they enjoy it? So would they spend $100,000 or $200,000 on a couple of yearlings? I think they would.
Well, it sounds great, and that's probably what's going to happen. But how many racetracks? How many harness tracks are left? Maybe 25, 30?
About 35.
35. So in another
in I think 13 states now.
All right. So in another,
we're talking pari-mutuel, not counting the fair tracks.
So within 5 years there'll be 3 left, and they'll all be in Kentucky.
No, that's not true.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Ohio is real strong. They have 7 tracks in Ohio. Kentucky has 3. So those look like the two strongest the two strongest states, in my opinion.
Michael said something, and it just hit me. You know, the horse can't talk, but like in the 80s, I thought they blew it because if you had somebody, a personality like a John Campbell, you mentioned him. First off, the guy, very articulate. He could speak to anybody, president of the country, anybody. He's a good-looking guy. In the 80s, you should have had him out there going on talk shows, somehow getting him on radio interviews, spending the money then, and that might have carried on. I'm thinking that's the way to go now with like a guy like this Brett Beckwith. Try to get some young people. Try to get them on podcasts. Not Larry, on your show, Larry, but on young people that have podcasts about, I don't know about what, I'm not savvy in it. But if there's a young person out there that has a podcast that's 18, 19, 20, 25, get him on that. There should be a public relations just to get him on that. The kid's smart. He can talk. He can drive a horse. And he's going to be your mouthpiece. You got to get somebody out there. That's the way I look at it. But
no, you're exactly right. But you need the older guys because the older guys still believe in the business. At least some of them do. Yes. And they remember when the business was powerful. It was powerful to bring people not only to watch races and bet on races, but just to people watch, and come out. And casino gambling is getting rather expensive. I don't know if any of you go to a casino, but a lot of times it's $100 minimum for blackjack. It's going to be absolutely out of people's reach. You're going to have an entire generation of kids that never, ever go to a baseball game, to a football game, to a basketball game. Why? Because it's too expensive. Their parents can't afford to take them. Now, we've got this thing. People love animals. We just have to figure out, we have to erase the past and figure out what's the way forward. And between better marketing and, I keep coming back to this, foreign commingling, if you could get some of these pools bulked up by people outside the United States, we already have Canada, but we need to work. I think Brazil might have gambling soon, and that's important because they're in the same time zone as the Eastern United States. You've got Asia, you've got Europe. So Europe could commingle into the day tracks. Can you imagine if Monticello had $100,000 pools, how much people would bet? That that would go from 100,000 to 125,000 to 150,000. If people knew they could make a $5,000 win bet on an even money shot, they would. You can't now because the 5,000 drives that even money shot down to 2 to 5 or 1 to 5. But if the pools had liquidity, I go back to when the stock market before Charles Schwab, right? What was the volume? Then all of a sudden, here comes a guy that says, "Here, I'm not going to have a market maker, where the stock sells at 62. If you want to buy it, it's 62 and an eighth. If you want to sell it, it's less." So they fixed the game. We have to do the same thing.
Everything you said, I agree with. How do we get it done?
Well, listen how bad the game is. So we got a 20% blended takeout, which means on an average, some tracks are less, Meadowlands is less, some tracks are more, but 20% blended rate. So 80% gets returned to the gambler, right? Now, if they gave us sports, they go, you know what? The four of us, we run sports. We got to run it with a 20% takeout. Okay. So you put in $110 each. So I put up $110. The casino puts in $110. And if I win, they take out 20%. 20% of $220 is $44 takeout. So now you're down to $176. So I either win $76 or maybe it's $66 and lose $110 when I lose. So then when sports gambling goes belly up, they go, well, people they just got tired of betting sports. No, they didn't. They got tired of getting robbed. So it's the equivalent of a roulette wheel with 7 zeros on it. Eventually, if you put out the roulette wheel with 7 zeros, how long would it take before there's nobody playing roulette? How long would it take if we put a 20% takeout on slots? Can I speak for like 60 seconds? I mean, if you go back to the 40s, they lowered the takeout on slots. Now, why did they do that? There was a movie about Meyer Lansky on HBO. It was fascinating. And the guy held up a card that said, greater pay equals longer play. So he says, what does that mean? That it's just going to take you longer. He says, eventually, you're just going to lose your money. It's just going to take longer. But that's why people bet slots. That's why the takeout you're allowed to take out in Las Vegas and Nevada Gaming Commission is 25%. But they don't take out 25% because they know that's not the optimum number. The optimum number is somewhere around 7 or 8%. And there was a decade where they thought it was 5 or 6. So all the sports that are thriving have lower takeouts. So one of the first steps is lower takeout, give these people a break, make it possible for people to win. You have a game that people can win at, they're going to play.
Well, the only thing I can say about that is that the whole idea of everybody in business is in it to make money, and they just want as much as they can get. And you're right. In some of them gimmick races, the takeout is even more than that.
That's correct.
And but
it's a sophisticated theory, and there's algorithms about it. But Larry, if you come in and bet $100 and you lose, all right, I make $20 off of you because $20 is the takeout. Actually, 17%, but let's say it's 20 to make the story easy. And you're done. I've made $20 off to you. But if I lower the takeout, if I lower the minimums, if I make the bet a little more palatable to you, I can make it so that if I can get you to the window 3 or 4 times, even though you show up with $100, you may bet 200, 300, 400. And the more money you bet, the more money there is for purses, the more money there is for management. But I have to make it possible for you to get to the window. This is all stuff that's lost on horse racing. Why? Because their glory days were when they were a monopoly. And I think we compared this to bowling 40 years ago. When bowling stopped being a monopoly, they stopped being a business. It's very difficult. So we have to just wipe the slate clean, start over. We got a great product. I'm not saying it's great all the time, but we have to make it better than it is, make the gambling part perceptually better than it is. And I think this thing all jives.
Well, the idea I liked the best was when it would happen at the podcast that you were there, was that buy your own racetrack, and you would set up the simulcasting stuff and everything, and that would definitely work. But then John Campbell, when asked his advice, he not only referred to you, but he says, "But who's going to put up the money?" And that's true. So now you're depending on Kentucky, and so you have no say.
Yeah, but Larry, there's a lot more money out there. I mean, look at was today the biggest volume in the history of the market? I mean, there is money out there. There are people that don't want to pay all their money to capital gains at the end of the year. So are there players out there? Yes. Do we need to make the product more exciting? Yes. But all this stuff is possible. We need to just restructure the business. That's all it is.
All right.
Well, that article today in the Pollock report about the training center in Kentucky. Now that looks like a really nice place. And then you also have the redesign of the Churchill Downs, which is $900 million they're putting in the Churchill Downs to redo it.
Well, let's come back to Freddy. Let's come back to what we were talking about last week. Yonkers. When Yonkers made a deal with the French, they moved up their post times. They had to stretch out to 30-minute post times, and they can only offer trotting races because the French were only allowed to bet on trotting races. But all of a sudden now, you had win pools of $70,000 or $80,000. So what happened during that period? All kinds of people switched over to Yonkers, or at least added Yonkers to their repertoire that were gambling, because now they know if I like a horse that's 7-2 and I want to bet $1,000 on him, he's going to stay at 7-2. He's not going to 6-5. All of a sudden now you got all kinds of new players. Why? Because there's liquidity in the pools. And you did it at a place that's got 8 horses that historically wasn't making getting a lot of action. Well, you could do that anywhere if you could get foreign money into your pools.
Yeah. And when we were talking with the New Zealand guy, Brad Steele, he was talking about like they have fixed odds racing. You can basically bet this race, this combo, and you can throw a soccer game in there if you want with the bet, and you can actually change your bet in the middle of the race.
And we need to adopt, I hate to be repetitive, but you look at what Churchill did with the Derby, you need to start and have a road to the Hamiltonian, a road to the Breeders' Crown, a road to the North America Cup, for not only because it makes inherent sense to start creating interest early, but if you did have a road to those races, let's say the North America Cup, and you started the stake season in March, because that race is in the second week of June, what would that do? Not only does it create more interest in the North America Cup, but now you stretch out the season so that now the stake season fits, because you've extended it 2 months, and now perhaps you won't have that August day where there's 3 stakes trying to get 3-year-old trotting colts at their track. It makes everything fit. Now, in theory, that's easy. Obviously, to make that happen, you need the resolve of a lot of people that love the business, but I think there's enough people that love the business.
Hey, Larry, I have a quick question for you. What's the record for your longest show?
We're getting there. Poor Joe Ricco. He probably thought he was going to come on a 20-minute podcast. I was looking at him before, and his eyes were starting to close. Joe,
no, I'm good. I'm pumped.
There's let's see. This guy says George Brennan is an outside post specialist. I saw him win at the Big M many times from post 7, 8, 9, and 10. This guy says Eric Brett. Yeah, he's great, but Dexter Dunn is the best now. Dexter Dunn.
Fine, you just
get them. Yeah, I got it.
Get them guys on it.
Okay, Tommy Dimes. George Anthony can be the spokesman. Is he still? Somebody said he was calling the race.
Still calling race at Yonkers.
Oh, he is.
You know what? He is the best. I love George. He can really. What was his line? the less you bet, the more you lose when you win. It was like, he used to come up with stuff like that. He's great. He's great.
That's a very true statement. The less you bet, the more. You know who come up with that statement first? Babe Donaway had a brother called Donald Duck. And early when the Meadowlands first opened, he was there. And we were having dinner one night. And he come up with that because one of the people at the table says, "Oh, maybe I won't bet 200. I'll just bet 100." And they come up with that. The less you bet, the more you lose when you win.
Yeah.
And you got to think about that to understand it. Okay, let's see. Joe Ricco, Jesse Black. Joe Ricco was a great guest tonight. Always a stand-up guy. Okay, we're going to get him to come on more as soon as he moves his computer from downstairs to upstairs, because every 15 minutes he disappears.
I'll get it fixed.
Fan participation, the way to fill the grandstands. That's right, Larry Cox, but I'm not going to go through what I said before. All I know is one thing, and I'm just going to say this briefly. If I had a farm and I had a track on the farm and I put in the newspapers an article, free rides in the sulky and the race bike with a harness horse for free. Come on. I'd have 20,000 kids with their parents coming. All they have to do the same thing. We won't get into that because you guys are tired of hearing me say that. Okay. Oh, the young kids don't drink, true, but they don't go to harness racing either. My kids and grandkids will never go to a harness track. Why would they let's be honest, we are dinosaurs. Well,
that's not true. And let me prove.
I'm going to agree with you, Michael, because I've been out to Shenandoah, and they market the college out there, and they have all the college kids coming out there to watch the races.
Good move.
Let me prove it to you. When I was growing up, DePaul had bars there were $1 beers at this bar on Monday, $1 beers at this bar on Tuesday, another bar on Wednesday, another bar on Thursday. And we did the circuit, obviously, by going wherever there were dollar beers, of course, because no one had any money. Well, 50 years later, guess what? You go to those bars, and it's still the same thing. The kids have no money, and they go to this bar on Monday, this bar on Tuesday, this bar on Wednesday. So don't tell me on a Friday night when Budweiser and Miller aren't running specials that if you didn't offer $2 beers on Friday and Saturday, you wouldn't get college students, because you would.
All right, Michael, maybe you can answer this one. Sheldon Glass says, why don't more harness tracks simulcast on YouTube?
I think Woodbine is, and maybe everybody's trying to see how it goes. It makes sense, right? That they would go on YouTube, but we are very slow. It's like the justice system. We want to see how they do. Realistically, it's the easiest forum there is, and we've gone through decoders and.
Michael, could there be some licensing issues with, like, what is it, Robinson, who holds it, or what's the group that holds the licensing that films the races?
Well, I'm sure that's why
there could be licensing issues with that.
There could be.
You can't even download their races because unless you pay for them or something. So
yeah, that's possible. But let's say Woodbine does this and they do create some interest, and obviously you're a lot more apt to get somebody on YouTube than you are to join Twin Spires or ExpressBet but this is another thing that you're seeing TV starting to downsize and streaming your platform. This platform, you would never get this on TV 20 years ago, right? Now, here you are. You're on it, and we are discussing ways where we could possibly improve this sport to the point where it's more viable, and maybe tracks start using this streaming to stream their special races, and we get more visibility, and they'll lead to good things.
What do you think about Jeffrey B's comment? Yonkers and Meadowlands will always be around.
I disagree.
I disagree.
Well, I'll tell you, I can only speak that MGM paid an enormous price for Yonkers, and that's a publicly held company. They've got stockholders that they have to answer to. But I have great hope that Yonkers can find a way to make the racing.
When they get a full casino license, that track is going to be a hotel.
Yeah, I agree. I think so. I think so. I mean, I hope not, but
I hope not too. But if they get a full casino, license, the first thing they're going to be getting rid of the racing as fast as they can.
It's certainly possible, right? It's a publicly held company.
Okay, what's this one? Eddie, Meadowlands will have gaming along with Monmouth Park, and Jersey will have a rebirth of Thoroughbreds and Standardbreds. Meadowlands will be America's #1 racino in the nation, with everyone else fighting. I think both Monmouth Park's going to be sold, ain't it?
I haven't heard that.
I'm not sure.
But if that happens, where what that gentleman said, if that happens, I'll be happy to buy that guy steak dinner for a week at Smith Wolanski.
Well, the Meadowlands, I don't think is going to be around much. You would know that, Freddy, wouldn't you?
I think if they don't get a casino, that 2027 will be the last year.
Yeah,
that's my opinion. So.
Okay, let's see. Eddie, there's 15 million people in Manhattan and North Jersey alone. Yeah, but that has nothing to do with... I learned a lot when Larry Kadish, who was my friend, tried to buy Roosevelt Raceway, and Sonny Wordland sold it to contractors, even though Larry offered more money, a lot more money. It's all about the money. Okay, Tommy Dimes, fixed odds for horse racing is the way to go. That's your idea, right, Michael?
I certainly think if you had an exchange, it would bring a lot more people and a lot more liquidity to the market, and it would also make the win pool that much more interesting, because the spread between the fixed odds and the pari-mutuels would be huge enough to get people to come in and arbitrage, which is the ideal way to get money into, because if you start getting people to arbitrage your sport, you get it from all sides. 30-second story. It happened about 20 or 25 years ago. Super Bowl opens up. The game opens up at 7, and nobody wants to move because everybody's scared. So the Barbary Coast comes in and says, "Oh, here, we'll gamble, right? We're from Las Vegas, so here, if you want the dog, we'll give you the dog at 7.5, and if you want the favorite, we'll give you the favorite at laying 6.5. We'll take a shot here and gamble." And they got all the money because they were willing to gamble. And I'm sure they might have been able to get a annuity or an insurance policy in case the game landed 7. I'm sure there was some guy sharp enough to come up with a price, but there's just out of the box thinking, right? Where this one guy, Bugsy Munoz or whoever it was, came up with something that's like brilliant, and they got all the money. So we need more of that.
Michael, so I just want to make sure I got this right. So in other words, if I go up and I bet a horse and he's 5-1, and then later on he goes to 2-1, I'm getting 5-1.
You're getting 5-1, just like football.
No brainer.
Yeah, and there's a way to there's a way to create that with an exchange. And the greatest part about the exchange is whoever's funding the exchange can't lose. The greatest part about horse racing nobody brings up is you can't lose. There's all kinds of stories there was a story about Gary Packard 20 years ago walking into, I think it was the MGM opening night, and beating the place for $20 million. Well, they lost $20 million that night. That never happens in horse racing, because if a guy bets, a horse, the house doesn't lose. It's all in the pari-mutuel system. So if you're Jeff Corral at the Meadowlands, or if you're Bill McClinchy at Woodbine, you want your guys to win on track. You want them all to win. And it's all possible because they're competing against people in California, in Florida, in Kentucky, in Illinois, all over the system. So it's set up where you can't lose the exchange, which is a way to talk somebody into doing it.
Okay, well, David says Michael is right in theory, but not in practical life. Nobody will throw good money after bad. But then he says MGM doesn't care about racing. Come on, man.
I agree with that.
I agree too.
Yeah. MGM's making their money. They get rid of the track. They could put hotels up, have all kinds of entertainment. They would. It would be like.
Well, it's like I looked it up. The racing stocks all were coming down. I mean, precipitously. They're all down about a third. Churchill, MGM, Eldorado. MGM, I think, was down to 26 from 40. It was, and then I know the day the market went up 3,000 yesterday. It came back to almost 30. I don't know what it finished at today, but that's the big thing. MGM is worried about their stock price.
Well, Freddy, we've been on for almost 3 hours. I think that's the longest. That's the longest. It would have been a little shorter if Joe had his computer by the thing.
Hey, I was restarting it pretty quick.
Yeah, blame it on Joe.
Anyway, this is I don't know how I don't know how many times we can talk about the same thing, because all your idea, Michael, and even John Campbell, who's right in the middle of all of this, says they're all great ideas, but it is what it is, and nobody's going to put up the money to do what really has to be done. So you're left with reality, and reality is after the decoupling and 2 or 3 years go by, Kentucky will probably be what the Meadowlands was in 1978.
Don't give up on the Meadowlands yet. Not yet.
No?
No.
Oh. It's why would they have no barn area? I mean, you know how much it costs to ship a horse now? You got the closest farm is 60 miles away. Of course, you're probably a couple of hundred to ship up. Then you got to ship back, and then they race 2 days a week. And
if they get a casino, they would not race 2 days a week.
4 hours before your race, if you're on Lasix, you're shipping up with other horses, so you could have horses that are in the last race or in the first race. I mean, you're going to leave at 12 o'clock at noontime, and you're going to be coming back at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's a long day.
We got to get off the negative.
Thank you, sir.
We got to be more positive. It could work. I think Michael's right. I love the things that he says, and
absolutely.
I mean, I'm not savvy to the numbers that he's coming up with. It sounds all good to me. I was going to say it sounds all Greek to me, but no. But what he's saying does make sense.
Okay, but if you look at Kentucky, what Kentucky's doing, they're investing the money into it. When you look at the what Churchill Downs did, right at, I think it's at Oak Grove, where they put the historic horse racing, historic horse racing slots, I'll call them, or whatever, and they put that in. They put $100 million up to put this facility up. They basically turned themselves into a partnership to promote the whole sport of horse racing. They're putting quarter horse racing in. They've got 3 harness tracks now. From what I understand, we have about 20 standardbred farms down there that have just recently been bought. So Kentucky's doing it right, and they're putting a blueprint out for everyone else to follow.
But Freddie, those machines were at Oak Lawn 25 years ago, and everybody just sat and watched. You know, I said last week that Oakland would have 65,000 people for the Arkansas Derby. They had 67,000. So yes, all this stuff is possible.
Hey, guys, honestly, I mean, the way I look at it, you do have a product, and you have to find a way to get it out there, like Michael is saying, and get people more interest in it. When you have 55,000 people show up at the Little Brown Jug, they closed the town down You can't get it. You can't go to the Dairy Queen. You can't go to the drugstore. Everything's closed down, because it's jug day. You have a product. You're just not marketing it right. You're missing something, but you definitely have a product. Hamiltonian. People are all out. I got friends of mine that live in Jersey. The guy goes once a year. He goes to the Hamiltonian. He loves it. He has a great time. So you do have a product, and the guy's got a lot of money. I mean, he could buy horses if he wanted. He's smart. but he's not into buying horses. But he loves the day. He feels like he's at Kentucky Derby. It's a great day, and so you got a product. There's a lot of people that don't know about it. In 1980, 79, 80, I went to Pocono. They opened up in March, I think it was. So I went there before Monticello. And I remember down the street, they have a place called the Wyoming Valley Mall. It's a big, giant mall. I was in the mall, I was talking to somebody. I said, well, I'm not from here. I'm from Monocel. I said, what are you doing here? I said, I race horses. He said, where do you race horses? I said, 2 miles down the road. The guy lived there. He never been to the track. When you meet somebody like that, and I learned this from real estate, if you don't know that I'm in real estate, it's not your fault, it's my fault. I'm supposed to tell you I'm in real estate. If you don't know it, it's my fault. If you're 2 miles down the road and you don't know that there's a racetrack there and you've never been to it, well, then that's the racetrack's fault. You got to be able to tell people what's going on. You have to do your marketing, and that's the problem. I'm big on marketing. I think a lot of things that Michael said can work. I am not smart enough to know how to implement them, but I think somebody has to get off and be able to do it.
What does this mean? Contract for Yonkers ends in May. What's that mean?
Probably the contract with MGM and the Horsemen's Association, but they're going to re-up it because, I know Feraldo's trying to get money to get lobbyists to go in, and lobby for them. It's going to be kind of hard because MGM, I'm sure, can buy better lobbyists, but they're trying. So I think I'm not concerned about that. They're going to write another contract. Will it be as good as this one? I have no idea.
Question for you guys: Is a casino in Manhattan even conceivable?
I don't see it.
I don't see it either.
I don't see it. To get there's a pain in the neck. To get back, parking, transportation. I don't see it. I don't know. I mean, they're trying to open one up in Nassau Coliseum, where that is. They're trying to open one up in Shea Stadium. I am leaning more towards Shea Stadium only because the guy that owns Citi Field,
Steve Cohn,
Citi Field, he's got so much money. The guy's a billionaire.
Yeah, he's a hedge fund genius.
Yeah, so I'm sure that he's gonna, Cohen, he's gonna get probably get the right to open up the casino. It gets crazy. Like, I sold, I told you the McDonald's deal. And what I learned from that is McDonald's, they ended up doing a traffic control. So they checked how many cars go by to make sure that there's enough traffic, right? It was by Kennedy Airport, so there was enough traffic. Then they do a survey where they see how much money so now this was 20 years ago, 25 years ago. They see how much money they're going to pull away, how much business they're going to pull away from each McDonald's, north, east, west, and south. So they know if it's profitable for them to open up. Then they give one of those people a chance to take that building over and open the McDonald's there. If not, then somebody else will buy it. So if you're going to open up a casino on every corner, well, then you're gonna eat yourself out because it's going to be diluted. It's like 7-Eleven. There's a 7-Eleven on every corner, Dunkin' Donuts. After a while, it just, you're not going to make the money. like Monticello had a casino. They do okay, but then they got a casino up north. Well, now people that were on the cusp of being close to Tioga and close to Monticello, now they got a choice. Well, I'd rather go to up there because it's 20 minutes closer, it's a half an hour closer, or whatever. So the more that opens up, you're going to dilute it a little bit. I don't know.
All right, guys, it's 3 hours. 3 hours, Freddy. Freddie, 3 hours.
3 hours and 15 minutes, Larry. We were on 15 minutes earlier.
I was only on for 3 hours because 15 minutes I was spending.
Yeah, Joe's gonna get. We're gonna have now. Listen, Joe. We do a podcast on Tuesday and Thursday, and Thursday we usually leave it for like Freddy with Michael and trying to resurrect the dead, meaning harness racing.
Cut it out.
We try to talk all about that. And I don't think anybody's listening anymore. Everybody's probably sleeping. But anyway, so that's what we do on Thursdays. So on Tuesdays, whenever you want to come in on Tuesday, Thursday, whatever, I think I could put like 10 people on this screen. And if you have nothing to do, just let Freddie know. I send Freddie the link.
The link.
Freddie knows how to do what he knows how to do.
Type in your email address and send it to you real hard.
Yeah, but every time I try it, I don't know. I just hit buttons all over the place. But anyway, so Joe, anytime you want to come on after you bring your computer closer to the
router.
Yeah.
I got to move upstairs.
Yeah. Well, don't you have a laptop? Is that a laptop or a regular
I'm
computer?
on a laptop right now. I got to move upstairs.
Yeah, just walk up the steps.
Yeah. Yep.
Where's your router at, Joe?
It's upstairs.
Okay.
That's why. That's the same problem I had in the beginning. Joe, if you're doing nothing, you should look back two podcasts ago, and you'll see Michael and John Campbell were talking about everything we were talking about tonight. Very, very interesting. But now, and that's the problem I run into, because I ask everybody to ask questions and make comments. But if we keep talking about the same thing over and over and over again, and that's why there's a lot of things that I can talk about, but I can't. There's a lot of things. There's a few stories I'm sure Joe could talk about, but he can't or he shouldn't. But in the mob genre, they're all informants, and now they all have podcasts, and they can talk about the 20 years or the 10, 15 years they were in the mob and who they killed and how it happened and everything else. And a lot of it is very, very intriguing. And they said that, the mob genre is over. In the meantime, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And every day, another mob guy who turned informant is coming on, is making another podcast. So we got to find out other things to talk about other than how can we get harness racing. What I'd like to do, and I started it today. And it's amazing. I started it. I mentioned it the other day about the reason I got in my trouble and the reason I went for millions and millions and millions of dollars and dealt with the worst people and killers in the world. And the reason I did what I did was because of the addiction that I developed. And I says I should do a podcast about addiction, because when my book was picked up, I wanted I think his name was Michael Melcher, the guy who wrote Luck, that TV series Luck, because he lost over $100 million betting on horses at Santa Anita. So when I talked to Nicholas Pileggi about the TV series, and I said, yeah, I made a 3-horse box. I would buy, or I get 4 horses dead and box the other 4. What's that mean? They don't know. But Milch knew and he understood, but he was getting senile. So today I started a list of people, all entertainers like Michael Jordan, who lost hundreds of millions of dollars betting, gambling on horses and sports, and on and on and on and on and on. The people are unbelievable, all famous people. And I'm making a list. And someday, and I know that you're a professional gambler, I think, Michael. Is that the right? Is that the
I did gamble on the races from 80 to 95. That was pretty much all I did.
But you're a pretty sharp guy, very sharp guy.
And I like to say I have my moments, just not many of them anymore.
There's a country western song, something like that.
I'm not as good as I once was, but I'm good once as I ever was.
Yeah. Say that again. I'm not as good as I once was, but I'm good once. I'm as good once as I
ever was.
Yeah. Anyway, so Michael, I'm sure you have a lot of good gambling stories, and I'm sure I have a guy. I don't want to go into that, but that's what I want. We got to start talking about something different, because we can't keep talking about the same thing over and over and over and over.
I'll give you a good gambling story. 1992, the pick 9 at Sportsman's Park was getting high, so I was playing the pick 9 every day, and with my friend who was a Chicago policeman, and we're losing every day, and maybe getting the consolation, maybe we didn't. But one day, I handicap 8 races. I can't figure out the 9th. So I give him a ticket. I said, there's a $48 ticket. I have no idea what to do in the 3rd. Just pick a horse and key a horse. So he goes up there, and we make a $48 ticket. He keys an 8-1 shot who wins, pays $19, and we run the whole table for $78,000. And my friend just died last year, the cop. But it's like just like people that own a racehorse, lightning can strike at any time, but you have to put yourself in the position for lightning to strike.
Yeah, you're right. But I think it would be great, because we can't keep talking about the same thing.
I think you should do a show on gambling, Larry.
Yeah. That's what I want to do, and I want to bring this up, because we can't keep asking John Campbell to keep coming on and say, well, where are we going to get the money? Because
no, I think you get 4 guys like Joe and talk about how we can improve the style of racing. I think maybe you get 4 guys like me and talk about what works for you gambling. What's the kind of bets you shouldn't make? Where should you be playing? These are all interesting shows.
Yeah. All right.
I think you should. The Beckwith. Why can't you get 4 guys like him? 4 young guys that say, well, what do you think? How do you approach the sport? But the Beckwith guy, that's a catch, because right now, that guy, it's 20, 25 races a week, like it's nothing. Maybe he is. Maybe he's the new case. I don't know.
Where's he from? The Meadows?
I think he's from Massachusetts, right?
Well, his grandfather was from. I raced with him a little bit in Foxborough.
Okay.
When I was up there in the 70s. But and then the son is Mark. I don't know the son, and is Mark Beckwith. I think I'm 99% sure I read it somewhere, or I heard it, where Mark Beckwith married Jerry Silverman's.
I can get in touch with Richie Silverman, and maybe he could put me in touch with the kid.
Yeah, I'm telling you, I listened to him on the Meadowlands, which I think the Meadowlands is sharp, where they end up interviewing the drivers before the race and ask them, what do you think about this horse? What do you think about that? What about the one you got in the 9th? He's very well spoken, kid's sharp, and on the track he's super. Dexter Dunn is super. All these guys, first question I would ask a guy like Dexter Dunn is, what's the difference in your style of driving here as it was when you were in Down Under?
But I think if you get 4 of them, they'd be more receptive to doing it.
Yeah, I think Michael's got something there. Maybe Aaron Merriman, or
you can probably get 4 kids that are at the Meadowlands, or just I think just to put 4 20 to 25-year-old kids on your show is just going to give you some life, that a little new angle on how they look at the sport, because obviously they hope it survives. Obviously they'd love to see it flourish. I mean, you get some positive vibes from them.
Yeah.
But this kid's the real deal, I think.
I think you're right. Everywhere he goes, it's amazing. I think he won 7 or 8 in Saratoga in one day. I think he won 8 in one day in Saratoga.
Well, I'll just tell you from a gambling standpoint, early on, a lot of the guys don't come to the Meadowlands. Timmy doesn't come, Yannick doesn't come. A lot of the Australian guys were in New Zealand for the driving championship. So, he's beating up on a lot of guys, but the stars weren't there. Well, the stars are starting to come back. McCarthy's are back. Dunn came back last week. David Miller's been there most of the year, and this kid's still winning. So the jury's out. Obviously, I'm not gonna put him on some kind of exalted throne because of what he's done at the Meadowlands in 3 months, but you can see the talent. There's no question.
All right. The only problem I have is that if it wasn't for Freddy, I wouldn't have Joe Ricco. I wouldn't have Bill O'Donnell. I wouldn't have you, Michael. I wouldn't have anybody.
If it was for Freddy, you would have ate dinner 2.5 hours ago. So he probably saved you 2 pounds.
I don't know. Anyway, we're gonna do that thing about gambling first, because I think there's a lot of interesting people from Gladys Knight that lost millions to Michael Jordan, who lost. Oh, yeah, I have a list here. I probably have 40 already, and between them, and just about every one lost hundreds of millions of dollars. It's unbelievable how much money, how it did. Because people ask me, how could you lose that amount of money? And it's all about the chase. That's the word. That's the one thing. You're chasing. You're always chasing. And then if you're gonna bet football, and you know that out of 16 games, the player historically only wins 3 or 4 times, why would you do that? And if you do that, when I lost millions of dollars betting on football alone, love mine, hockey and everything, but when the best, an old man told me this. He says, if you're going to bet, just see who's playing, bet on the biggest mismatch and bet the underdog. And I didn't try it, but I looked at it for a while, and I would have won. Just get the biggest mismatch of all the games and bet the underdog. And that's it. So I never tried it because I haven't bet on a sporting event since 1972. But that's it. But I think a show on gambling, and I'd love to get, I'd love to get some of these heavyweight gamblers on. I think I might be able to, because them gambling stories, and get some guys like me that after you lose a fortune and pay back, and how it destroyed, you wind up on a park bench, how many lives it destroyed and everything else. And here's some of them stories, because there's a whole lot more gamblers out there that would tune in than horse people wanting to hear these stories that we're telling,
Yeah.
Larry, how many fortunes were won or lost in the stock market the last 4 days?
Well, I heard there was one guy that with $1 million made over 30 million the day before yesterday, the day that it went up to 3,000. It was, so I don't know. I know the one richest person I know outside of Larry Kadish was a guy called Tony. I think it's Tony Padone, and he died of cocaine. But he was in the commodities market, and them guys make a lot of money. They make millions and millions and millions. I wish instead of stealing hubcaps when I was a kid, finish school and learn how to do the stock market thing. Them people make a lot of money.
I go back to what a Vegas journalist said, somebody asked him, why is Las Vegas so popular? And he simply said, because without action, nothing can happen. Yeah. And that's why gambling is always going to be here.
And 90%, when I was doing what I was doing at the New York tracks, not so much, not Monticello, but I'm talking about Aqueduct and Belmont. Every once in a while, I had to go there. And on every level, especially at Belmont, they have like 6 levels. The Genovese crew is on the first level, Colombo second level. They're all there. I mean, they're all there. Every mobster was at the flats every afternoon, and it's just, and I could probably. I'll tell you one thing: if John Gotti was still alive, he'd come on this podcast and talk about that. He would. He would. I had that one horse for him, and he would. I mean, he was probably the only one, but every mob guy is just a gambler, and that's why I don't think the thoroughbred business. Why they never they're in trouble too now, I think, right? The thoroughbreds. Yeah, they're in trouble too. They're probably in trouble because all the mob guys are out of jail, in jail. Anyway, that's it, guys. Whenever you want to come back on, just contact Freddy and let him send me a link either every Tuesday and Thursday night at 8:00. Michael, you too.
Why don't we just stay on until Tuesday?
I can stay on. My bar's open till 4.
I want to talk about some gambling stories with you, with you, Michael. And I'm going to make up a list. I got a lot of them. I have a lot of them here that I started already. And it's unbelievable. People that I never even I never thought in a million years lost hundreds of millions of dollars betting on horses and sports.
Well, I want to thank the 3 of you because this platform did some good tonight. And
well, it's nice meeting you, Michael. I hope to be on again with you, and a lot of insight you put to it.
Thank you, sir.
I've
enjoyed meeting you also.
Hey, but Freddy, is there any way that I could how do I put a link out where anybody that wants to come on could just hit the link? Is there a way to do that, or you got to send it individually?
You could do you could copy a bunch of people onto it, but you got to email it to them.
All right.
Yeah, you better have it more like a format where you have certain people instead of just.
Oh, as soon as you said the word copy and for that, you lost me. So that ends. Joe, you're laughing. You know how many podcasts I did where I forgot to hit go live? I did a whole podcast and I never hit go live. And then one time the sound was out and it's terrible. I'm not good at this. It's amazing. I think this is the 120th podcast we did, but we have to. I know we have to start changing it up because, how many times can we talk about the same thing? But I think I'd like to talk about the gambling and the addiction and how bad it is, and then just like we got to mix it up. But the problem is that you're a gambler. Joe is in the horse business now, real estate. What are we going to talk about? Buying fix-it homes, homes and fix them up, and what?
That's the best score I've made.
That's what?
Buying a house, fixing them up, and selling them. I've done that too.
Does that work?
Yeah, but you create wealth by keeping it. You got to keep them, and then that's how you're going to create wealth.
How's the real estate business now with the interest rates and everything? Is it good or bad or what?
Real estate's local, and it's Long Island is booming. It's booming. Yeah, we don't have enough inventory. Even other parts of the country too. It's the same thing. There's just not enough inventory.
Can you imagine what these houses will sell for if the interest rates drop?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm seeing houses. You know, well, Freddie knows Westbury. I mean, they're selling for $800,000-900,000. I got 2 houses I put in contract for $650,000 that are garbage. They're like the worst house in the neighborhood, and the guy's gonna build. The guy's gonna buy it. He's gonna knock it down and then put a new house there and sell it for like $1.6 million, $1.8 million. It's crazy. Yeah.
But the commissions that you get, it's not like years ago, like you get 10%. Now you get 3%, 2%. Sometimes you got to split it.
Commissions are a little bit higher years ago. They're not as high now, but you know you got to add it up. The prices are higher now, so the commission's a little bit more. But you know, typically the way it's set up is our company will set up a commission. You know, because of antitrust laws, we can't go together with a bunch of other realtors and say we're all going to charge 6% and stay with it. We can't do that because of antitrust laws, so we'd all lose our license and stuff. But typically, you're going to get commissions between 4 and 5. You know, and now with the new law, the way they've changed it, the seller pays a commission and the buyer pays a commission. You know, whenever the government gets involved in your business, they screw it up. There's two people.
The seller and the buyer, both seller and buyer pay a commission?
Well, if I list a house, and the seller's going to pay a commission. Let's say the seller pays a commission of 2.5%. Now, if the person that has the buyer, they have a contract with that buyer now, so that buyer is going to pay him 2.5%. So what they'll do is they'll take that commission out of their end. So the buyer is ending up paying a commission to them, and the seller's paying a commission to me. That's a new law that just started this year because, I think Berkshire Hathaway got sued for like $7 or $8 million, or maybe $20 million. A lot of companies got sued because they felt that the seller was paying a commission for the buyer's agent, and that shouldn't be done. The buyer's agent's working, and the fiduciary obligation is to the buyer. If I'm a seller's agent, my fiduciary obligation is to the seller. So they said it's a conflict of interest. The seller shouldn't be paying his buyer's commission. The buyer should pay their own commission. So, like I said, if the government gets involved, it's going to be screwed up somewhere. But it was really tough in the beginning, but now we're all pretty much understand how it's done, and the commission's the same. It's just worded differently.
Yeah.
You know what else we should do one night, Michael?
I'm listening.
We should get a program, because somebody down here just said handicap the races live, or we should get a program. We should get a program for, like, you know, the races that are going to be tomorrow or the next day, and
we can do that,
and just go race to race and handicap, and we can have 10 guys on here, all horsemen, and say, okay, who do you like in this race and why do you like it? Because that would be interesting. And
I do a detailed analysis of the Meadowlands, so we could come here on a Thursday night and handicap the Friday card.
Oh, that'd be good. But how do we show it on the? How the hell would I do that? I would have to.
We're certainly not going to figure it out now, but let's figure it out.
Just take pictures, and we just email them over to Larry, and he can put them up on.
That's right. I could put them right on the screen. That's right, Freddy. That's very good. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do that.
You should do one for the Kentucky Derby too.
When is that?
First Saturday in May.
May.
I can get you some people for that. And then if what you should do is when the Yonkers has the finals of the Borgata and the matchmaker, maybe we could do that.
Okay. All right. Freddy, you know more about this. As usual, you're going to have to handle some of this. Just get the programs or whatever and email them to me, and then I could do, I could do this kind of stuff. See, like any picture I could put up there. So,
well, I think if you just put a blank program page up there, so when people are talking about it, they can look and see what everybody's talking about.
Yeah, if you send me a program, like Freddie said, take a picture of it on your phone, and then email it to me, and then I could take a picture of it and put it right up there, just like this.
Yeah, well, the Meadowlands has free programs on their website, so the Friday program is available Thursday.
Oh, and how do I get it? I just go to the Meadowlands?
Just go to the Meadowlands website, and you download the program for free.
All right, I'm gonna try that. I'm gonna.
By the way, here's a commercial. You don't have to pay for a Meadowlands program. You go to the website the day before, and those programs are gratis, courtesy of Trackmaster and the Meadowlands.
Okay, I'm going to try that.
And you know what would be a good thing? Get Michael and if you could get a couple of drivers, not me. I mean, a couple of drivers that are driving currently at the Meadowlands, and then the three of them can talk about it. That would be a hell of a show.
Yeah.
People would want to listen to that, and then this way we can bet. I would probably take Michael's bet because drivers usually can't handicap too good.
Okay, guys. It's 11:21. How long is that? 3 hours and 21 minutes?
Yep.
Wow.
Yes, sir.
9, 10, 11, 3 hours. Wow. This is longer than Joe Rogan's podcast. Wow. All right, guys, thank you very much for coming. And that's what we're going to do. And Joe, whenever you want to come back on after you move your thing upstairs, and we'll do that. I'm going to look for I'm going to try to do that. And Michael too, you come on, you're a very interesting guy, and because we're going to change it around a bit, and there's a lot to talk about.
Yes, there is.
Freddie, if it wasn't for you, none of this would happen. I would be dead. And Tuesday, I have Joe Garino and Anthony and Eddie, who's been giving us thoroughbred tips. The last the last three horses he gave me win. One paid $48, one paid $17, one paid, and then the other night he says, I got a horse in tomorrow. He says he should be all right. He'll definitely hit the board. And he finished second. He's a long shot. He finished second. Well, anyway.
At least he was only dead in the double.
I ain't gonna say it. Okay, Michael, Freddie, Joe, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll all be in touch.
All right.
Thanks.
See you guys.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.